Welcome to Late Night Story. When the world goes silent and shadows stretch longer, some stories awaken, whispered only to those still awake. So put on your headphones, turn down the lights, and let me guide you through the quiet hours. If you're listening alone, you're exactly where you need to be. If everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world, don't forget to subscribe before you drift too far into the dark.
Story 1. I was told to hold my breath when driving past a cemetery. Now I know why. An act I learned as a child. To hold my breath if I am in a car that is cruising past a cemetery. I don't remember who told me, but I remember it was something my friends and I would follow religiously as children, no matter who was driving or where we were going. And if the windows in the car were down, it would be mass panic to roll them all up before those wheels crested the front of the cemetery. Back then, they were the manual crank windows, the ones that took all of my scrawny kid strength to get closed. But in those moments, they always managed to close in the nick of time. I'm not sure any of us knew why we were doing it. I certainly didn't. Regardless, it's a practice I've kept up even though my 30th birthday is right around the corner. It wasn't like I had big plans for my birthday, but it would have been nice to be able to celebrate it. I remember making a concrete decision when I got my own license that I would keep playing the game for nothing if not for myself. Sometimes the practice seems silly to acknowledge, but my mindset has always been I'd rather be safe than sorry. If other people are in the car, I'm discreet about it, much less fanfare than when I was a kid. Just one large inhale as the tires continue to glide on the road. I casually roll the windows up like it's no big deal. Maybe like I saw a bug, I didn't want to crawl inside the car. But it isn't always feasible to hold your breath in time. I mean, I don't always see the cemetery until I'm smack in the middle of it. I immediately stop breathing when I realize what I'm driving by. But at that point already feels too late. Until 2 days ago, I didn't know the consequences. Now I do. It's because I moved to a new town that all of this happened. I didn't know that the back roads that led to the craft store would contain so many cemeteries. It was in my nature to simply avoid these types of roads, to take the highway even if there was more traffic. I was alone on my way to pick up supplies for one of my many craft projects. I should have turned the car around when I saw the road that I was going to be on for 7 miles contained nothing but curvy, grassy, open space. It wasn't like there was anyone else in the car to question my actions. I should have known as I made my way down the winding road there would be multiple cemeteries. But I told myself not to be ridiculous. A kid's game should not keep me from driving down the fastest route to somewhere. My other mistake was leaving my windows open. At this point, it was an act of defiance. I knew there would be cemeteries, but refused to acknowledge them before they arrived. Granted, these days windows went up much faster with electronics, but apparently not fast enough. I didn't even know anything was wrong until the next day. I woke up groggy, wiping the sleep from my eyes as I stumbled down the hall to the bathroom. My eyes were bulging and bloodshot, as if something had been pressing on the inside of my skull, trying to get out through my eyes. A thin trickle of dried blood from sometime in the night caked itself onto my neck. I followed the line back up to my right ear, as if something had been trying to force itself out that way. My nose was swollen, and the skin of my face was hot to the touch, as if fighting off some kind of infection. But before I go any further, I need to get back to the crux of it, the actual event. So like I said, I was driving on an unfamiliar road with that familiar itch creeping up my back, the one that told me there would be a cemetery around every corner. The reason I didn't see it right away was because my phone distracted me. And before you sneer at me, I know I shouldn't be looking at my phone when I drive, but I just happened to be waiting for an important work update. The ironic thing was it wasn't even the update I was waiting for. It was my sister in a crisis. She's always in a crisis, but usually her crises don't impact me as much as this. They usually don't transfer over like a curse waiting to impregnate the next person. I clicked on the text to see a wall of blue with lots of exclamation points and angry face emojis. This is the reason I didn't realize my little red car had passed over the plane. I wasn't even reading the text. I closed out the green message app almost immediately. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't something dire, something that actually needed to be taken care of at that moment. It's hard for me to describe to you the surge of fear that traveled down my back when I glanced back at the road. Of course, I stopped breathing immediately. Yes, I pulled up on all 4 window buttons as soon as my fingers unlatched from the wheel. It was over in mere seconds. One moment, I was in the middle of driving by a cemetery, and in the next a moment passed. The sun blazed into the car and started cooking everything within now that it had no way to escape. Even though the moment was over, I didn't want to roll the windows back down, as if I could gain favor from the ghost if I just kept following the rules. But obviously I had to take in a breath at some point and blow it out in the next. I continued to breathe and cook in the car, my air conditioning temporarily broken. I had all the tools to replace my blower motor, the part that shit the bed last week. But since it was a nice day, I figured it could wait. So that's the reason for the sweat trickling down my back. Pure laziness. But I knew I couldn't be too careful and rolled the windows back down. I eased my car around a bend only to be faced with another cemetery. This one I could prepare for. I could see it a little bit ahead. I was able to take that deep breath in that I needed before driving by. I didn't even mind that I was roasting like a rotisserie anymore, because I was safe. The closed windows and the lack of breath kept me safe. Would you think I was lying if I told you I encountered another cemetery a mile and a half down the same road? I swear it was the last one, but I didn't inhale any fresh, non-circulating car air until I parked and threw my door open 15 minutes later. Those breaths were some of the most satisfying I'd ever taken. The fall air hit my nostrils in such a cool, clean way. Maybe that was my mistake. I was too greedy with the fall air. The text that ruined my life? I know some of you must be curious. It was because her current boyfriend, the guy she'd been on 2 dates with, didn't like cats. Could you even call someone your boyfriend after 2 dates? She lived alone with 2 cats, Cinnamon and Sugar, so clearly this relationship could never work out. She was outraged that anyone could hate cats, especially her dream guy. Well, I guess he wasn't her dream guy anymore. By the time I checked out at the craft store, I mostly forgot about my escapade on the drive there. Like I said, I didn't realize the consequences. Up until yesterday morning, it was just a silly kid's game. And yes, I answered my sister's text with all the correct platitudes like how dare he and you're too good for him. When I think back on it, I did take a different way home, whether consciously or subconsciously is up for debate. There weren't any cemeteries on the way back, at least not any I saw. That was 2 days ago, almost 48 hours to the hour. Most of my hair has fallen out. I'm typing with one finger, the only one left with a nail attached. At least it's my pointer finger. Small miracles and all that, the rest fell off last night. I found them clinging to my bed sheets. Toenails too, those are gone. I tried voice to text with my computer, only to find I don't have a voice anymore. All that came out was strangled, gasping noises. I guess it makes sense. When I looked in the mirror, my chest was sunken in, my neck shriveled, all the folds of my trachea and esophagus visible beneath the thin layer of skin. I'm starting to leave blood smears on my keyboard. I don't think this nail is going to last much longer. I guess I should get to my point soon. I think it's too far gone for me to ask for help. So I guess this has turned into one of those warning posts. You know, the ones that tell you to watch out, always look behind that corner, turn on the lights before bed. In this case, always check for cemeteries. Never take your eyes off the road. There are so many questions that must be left unanswered. What about the air conditioning or the heat? Can the ghosts get in if you turn those on? Was it my open window, or do the windows not matter? Is it all cemeteries? All ghosts? Do you have to be driving? I don't have time to answer any of these. I'm already infected, possessed, haunted, or whatever this is. You can test all these theories if you want. I'm not sure I recommend it. Another tooth tumbled out of my mouth a moment ago. I think I only have 2 left now. It's hard to keep my jaw closed. I'm trying to prevent the blood from trickling out. It's not working. The keyboard is slick now. My breaths are shallow. It's like I can't catch my breath. A bit ironic, as if the ghosts are still stealing the air from my lungs. like I'm still driving past that cemetery. I think I only have a few more moments left, just enough to post this. I wonder what my family will think when I don't answer their calls. I wonder how long it will take them to find my body. I wonder if I will have a body to leave behind it all. Story 2. The cabins in Alaska are reproducing. The rickety cabins in the Alaskan wilderness are a dime a dozen. Hardly cause for alarm. That said, 6 months ago, there was just one new cabin. A month later, I spotted 3 on our bootlegging route. Then 5. Then 8. All identical looking on a cursory inspection. From there, I lost track, so I stopped counting. I just drive on by and try not to dwell. Eventually, though, I couldn't ignore it. They truly appeared to be multiplying. What's worse, they were never in the same place twice. If there was one nestled between a creek bed and a cliff face in September, it wouldn't be there in October. And as time passed, there seemed to be more of them earlier in our route, almost as if they were migrating. A flock of large wooden animals marching south for winter, before the crash, before we really got to bear witness to their infernal nature close up. Ray and I were just a pair of miserable old coots gathering dust at some sticky bar top in downtown Anchorage. Nothing like a little legal booze to celebrate another successful delivery of some extrajudicial booze. We sipped lager in silence, attention glued to the small TV hanging above the liquor shelf. Not sure where Yuka had wandered off to. Young blood was probably chasing tails. The Astros were losing to the Red Sox. Grumbling, I averted my eyes from grainy feed. They wandered to the bar a bit aimless, but eventually landed on some missing person flyers strung across the wall between a pair of brightly flashing pinball machines. They weren't just for one person. I counted 7 or 8 different faces amongst a tragic collage. Something baleful began to churn in my stomach just from looking at the flyers. But I tried to reassure myself. It's Alaska. People go missing all the time in Alaska. Then, out of the blue, I asked Ray if he'd noticed the cabins. He looked at me funny, head cocked, frost blue eyes narrowing, and my fears just sort of leaked out. I've suffered food poisoning with 10 times the grace compared to how I spilled my guts that night. When I was done, he slammed his glass down and turned forward, swivel stool squeaking under his considerable weight. All hell, Bill. 60's a little late to be catching superstition, though. Your brain must be getting soft. I lifted my beer and clinked the rim against his. Cheers to that. I muttered, raising my glass. Finished the last quarter of my drink in a single hearty gulp. The taste of caramel and fermentation slithering over my tongue. Oh, don't be sensitive. Just, I don't know, think about it rationally. The woods all look the same blustering through the wilderness on a snowmobile. You're probably just forgetting which cabins are located where. I shrugged. It was a logical explanation, but according to the natives, those woods were known to resist logic's calming inertia every so often. Water sliding off a beaver's back, without its skin getting wet. Really don't think I'm forgetting anything, Ray. Not sure the old bastard heard me, as the words left my mouth. He spun around, scanning the pool tables, the bathroom line, the pinball machines, before turning forward with a sigh. Locks of brittle white hair dancing over his shoulders. Remind me to inform Yuka, wherever the fuck he is, that I'm prohibiting you from his ilk's damn campfire stories for foreseeable future. Nonsense is making your head loopy. And that was that. I dropped the matter, and we resumed drinking. 2 weeks later, we'd be departing from Anchorage on what would turn out to be our last run. I'm sure Ray's right flustered in hell. The only thing he hated more than being wrong was listening to another rendition to Legends, and I'm about to make him the poster child of one. Because whatever this is, the walking cabins and the devils that stole my Confederates, it's a new legend for the blissfully uninitiated. Yes, Prohibition is still alive and well in some parts of the U.S., though there ain't much money in bootlegging most places. Any idiot with a working car and a touch of criminality can illegally transport bottom-shelf vodka across certain county lines and demand a higher profit for the risk they incurred. But the hard sell ain't that simple for our customers, though. They call them dry villages in Alaska, can be treacherous to cross in and out of dry villages during winter, what with the apocalyptic snowfall and the rampant permafrost, and the meager hours of sunlight available per day. That danger allowed us to market wares with fairly generous markup. A $25 bottle of red label weed purchased at an Alaskan liquor store will be worth $200 by the time we reach the dry village. It's unsavory work. I ain't denning it, nor am I trying to justify my part in supplying alcohol to a community that's been rocked by its barbaric wiles time and time again. Put simply, smuggling is all I've ever done, and I know running alcohol is better than trafficking opioid from Colombia to El Paso, morally speaking. So when Ray proposed we abandon the cartel and move north to start our own modest operation in Alaska, I jumped at the chance. Wouldn't say I'm a strong candidate for sainthood, but even my small, stiff heart could only tolerate peddling death for so long. I've slept much more soundly since we left Texas. This last week's been different, though. Don't think I've caught a wink the whole damn time. I can't stop thinking about what they did to Ray, and wherever he is, I don't believe he's sleeping either. Suppose there's some solidarity in that. The crash was over and done within the blink of an eye. Yuka was lead in, and he should have been going slower. Ain't all his fault, though. Ray was driving too close to him. Typically, Ray would lead. He preferred it, according to him. Seniority gave his preference the most weight, as we were preparing to ship off earlier that morning. However, Yuka planted a wide, capricious grin over his jaw, hopped on his snowmobile, and zoomed ahead of the both of us. Ray's knew he was acting up, so he was digging to the cargo at that moment, looking for a misplaced bottle of aspirin. Boyd caught him with his metaphorical pants down. That man was not one to suffer such indignities. His face flushed bright cherry red. He discharged some expletives that I'd rather not reiterate here. Then, he lumbered onto his own snowmobile and gave chase. Don't think he ever found a painkiller. He then spent the next 2 hours futilely trying to overtake the boy, dead set on resuming his proper place at the front of pack. Just another event in a long line of pissing contests between the two man-shaped children as we cussed into the final third of our trek. It happened. Had about an hour of sunlight left. We were heavy with cargo. Full cases of liquor drifting behind each snowmobile on detachable sleds. Made sudden changes in direction nearly impossible. Without warning, Yuka veered right. A sharp, spastic turn that likely would have sent him into a barrel roll by itself. Made all the worse by the fact that the boy's cargo sled became latched to the snout of Ray's snowmobile as he turned. I slammed on the brakes and skidded to a halt. Helplessly, I watched as ice and velocity and momentum melded together to create something deathly. A shuddering, metallic centipede with writhing segments that looked desperate to be free of each other. Yuka's snowmobile rolled. The boy made himself into a ball, head down, knees to his chest, and fell from the vehicle on its first rotation. The noise of crunching metal, tearing plastic, and shattering glass rang through the otherwise silent tundra. Spilled liquor painted nearby snow the color of dirt-stained pennies. Ray's snowmobile continued on for a moment. Then his forward motion and Yuka's abrupt turn reconciled. Whiplash sent the stubborn bastard flying from the seat. His vehicle tumbled onto its side in the same direction. It landed against the frozen earth with a resounding thud, accented by a whining crackle. His cab had been caught beneath the snowmobile as it bounced off the ground. Ray's wails followed. Both snowmobiles slid to a stop. The wreck settled. No more gnawing metal or twisting plastic. All that remained was a low, mechanical gurgle of my snowmobile's engine, Ray's vacillating shrieks, and the Alaskan wind whistling through the snowdrifts, mocking us. Trembling, Yuka stood. He surveyed himself head to toe, looked right surprised at his continued physical integrity. My gaze drifted over his shoulders. Behind him, I saw the sun flirting with the horizon, threatening night, and up a small slope, huddled amidst a cluster of snow-dappled pines. There was a cabin. It didn't take much convincing to get me trudging up that hill. First, though, we regrouped at Ray's side. The boy was profusely apologetic. That was before he saw the sorry state of the man's leg. 2. Now, I ain't no Hemingway, but I am perfectly capable of painting a pretty picture of Ray's mangled appendage. However, I'm choosing to defer the more gruesome details. Ain't pertinent to story. Plus, there's other, prettier pictures I plan on painting. And describing those hellscapes actually serves a purpose beyond willful grotesquerie. So, moving past the shock and the horror, Yuka and I got to work. Poured half a bottle of our highest proof beer on the wounds, then gave him the rest to drink, which he chugged. Next, we splintered the calf bones using some gnarled sticks and a few scraps of cloth. Meanwhile, Ray was howling at Yuka, berating the kid senseless, and he just took it panic-stricken and bleary-eyed. All he had to say in his defense was, "I saw someone back there, eyes peek in over the tree. Thought they was going to jump out." Slightly unnerved, I turned away from them and surveyed the crash site. Dusk had begun to mask the scenery. I pulled a flashlight from my rucksack, flicked it on, and walked a few yards forward, thick snow crunching under my boots. I dragged the bright white halo across the horizon. All I saw were two slim spruces wavering ominously in the wind. Boy was in shock, I figured, seeing things that weren't actually there. I was surprised to find Ray had softened by the time I got back. Caught him apologizing for riding Yuka's ass, acknowledging his part in the crash between moans of breathless pain. It wasn't like him to give anyone slack, let alone the kid. Could have been high on the endorphins. Could have been a faint glimmer of the bastard's withered humanity leaking through his broken exterior. But, truthfully, I think it was the setting sun that made him soft. Night was falling, dropping blanket after blanket of black satin over the desolate landscape. And he didn't feel safe, potentially die an asshole. Don't want to be turned away from the pearly gates just for saying a few nasty things you didn't really mean, right? We pulled our whimpering, slightly drunk comrade away from Crash and set him at the base of a sloping hill, up against the hull of a massive pine tree. The only snowmobile that was still running was my own, so I proposed I travel to the nearest dry village for help, with Yuka staying behind. Ray expressed a vehement distaste for that plan. First off, nearest village is an hour away, and it's going to be pitch black out here before I even finish the sentence. But let's say you do manage to get there safe. You want to explain to the authorities why we out here? Dead's better than jail. Always. My gaze crept over to Yuka. Even in the dim light, I could tell his skin was moon pale, his brown eyes fixed vacantly on Ray's decimated foot. There was a brief silence, empty of Ray's previously labored breathing, empty of the mocking wind, empty of everything. A harrowing vacuum of noise. Then, "I saw a cabin up the hill," Yuka muttered. "You know, I did as well," Ray chimed, slurring his words. "Looked abandoned to me, but how about y'all go see if anyone's home? I'll start pitching a fire in the meantime. Worst comes to worst, we'll rough it out here for the night, but I have a feeling that won't be necessary." I felt my stomach pirouette. Hot bile lapped against the back of my tongue. I wanted to protest, but a misplaced belief in the humdrum rationality of this world kept my lips sealed tight. "It's just a cabin," I told myself. "Fine," I replied. "We'll leave you with some kindling and a lighter." Before Yuka and I started up the incline, I asked him one more thing. "What if it ain't abandoned, Ray? And if so, what if they ain't so keen on helping us?" He chuckled, snapping the lighter on and placing the smoldering flame under his chin. "Haven't you heard? People go missing in Alaska all the time, Bill." The cabin resided in a circular clearing 3 minutes up the hill. It was a squat, unremarkable building. No porch, no overhanging roof, no stairs leading up to a stoop. Just a small rectangular box with an unlabeled door and a single front-facing window. Couldn't see a damn thing through the glass. From what I could tell, seemed like the darkness inside nearly matched the dark brown bark the cabin was made from. Yuka once again was lead in. The closer we got, the slower I moved. The boy maintained a steady forward pace, headstrong to his dying breath. "Hold on a second," I whispered. I jogged to catch up and placed my hand on his shoulder. Tried to pull him back. "Ain't no time for pussyfooting, Bill." He snipped, shrugging me off. Irritated, I let him go. Crouched down behind a snowdrift and watched him approach. Alarm bells the size of SUVs were sounding in my skull, but I couldn't exactly pinpoint why. The last murmurs of sunlight were beginning to dissipate above our heads. He was only a few steps away from the door when I noticed it. Didn't believe my eyes at first, because it made no earthly sense. I angled my head, twisted my neck side to side. but the observation did not change. There was a narrow strip of reflective fabric on Yuka's coat, running over his shoulders. Fleeting sunlight glinted off the material. As expected, the glint moved across the fabric when I moved my eyes. The window was in line with his shoulders. It should have reflected light too, but it didn't, almost as if it wasn't a window at all, just a portrait of a window, sketched across the cabin's exterior. Yuka reached for the knob, against my better judgment. I shot up from the snowdrift. "Boy, get the hell back here." I bellowed. He turned to look, but it was too late. The tip of his ring finger made contact with the cabin door. His hand retracted violently. He muffled a yelp, waving his palm in the air like he'd sustained a burn, like his fingers had grazed the edge of a sizzling grill. Behind him, the cabin started to come alive. Shrill, creaking echoed through the clearing as the cold wood creased and rippled. Boils the size of footballs popped from its surface, only to disappear a second later. I couldn't seem to look away. The squeaking thumps of someone sprinting through half-frozen snow swelled in my ears, and yet I still couldn't peel myself from the spectacle. As the sky turned black, the cabin writhed, bowing in some places, inflating in others, a shipping container-sized lump of bark-colored clay kneading under the monstrous, unseen hands of God. Yuka grabbed my wrist as he passed by, damn near dislocated it. Not to imply I ain't thankful. Don't think I would have left if he didn't kickstart me. We stumbled down the incline. Pine needles clawed at my face. My diaphragm wheezed like a weathered bagpipe. Eventually, the flickers of a newborn fire brought us right back to Ray. "What the fuck happened up there?" he croaked. Yuka fell to the ground, tearing at the gloved hand that had touched the cabin's doorknob, moaning in agony. I knelt next to him, helped him get the garment off. His eyes were wild. The vessels in his neck were throbbing. With my assistance, we finally revealed skin. His ring finger was tense with hot fluid. In only a few minutes, the digit had turned elderberry purple and was swollen to the size of a Cuban cigar. There was something slender sticking out of the inflamed digit. His wrist trembled. Yuka saw it too. What is it?" he whispered. I brought my eyes closer, trying to determine what had pierced his flesh. Behind us, Ray continued jabbering. "Anyone gonna enlighten me regarding this new crisis?" My head flew over my shoulder, and I looked him dead in the eyes. "Jesus Christ, Ray, hush." His brows leapt across his forehead, mouth slightly agape. He was startled, maybe enraged, but he obliged and closed his damn jaw. I turned myself back to a whimpering, terror-struck Yuka. Gently, I angled his hand towards the bristling fire. Finally got a good look at it. "It's the splinter." I muttered. Ray scoffed. "Good Lord, kids have a conniption over a measly splinter." The shard would squirm. Then, in one serpentine motion, it buried itself under Yuka's skin. A war drum erupted inside my chest. "Ain't no regular splinter, Ray." I perked my ears. Yuka's eyes darted over his shoulders. The sound of creaking was emanating from the darkness of the slope, multiple instances of it at varying pitches and volumes, but each was noticeably rhythmic, chugging along at a steady pace. Creoic asterisk, pause. Asterisk, creoic asterisk, pause. Asterisk. And they were all getting louder. "We need to go," I whispered. Ray nodded. Yuka gave no indication that he heard me. The boy had stopped whimpering. In the fire's shimmering orange glow, I could tell that his whole hand had become swollen, and that he was staring at Ray with a look of hunger behind his eyes. Should have known he was a dead man walking. Right then and there, I considered shooting him. God's honest, I did. My sidearm wasn't far. Doubt Ray would have given me too much flack for being overly cautious. In the end, I deferred, convinced myself that it was all in my head. Quietly, I asked Yuka to help Ray onto one of the sleds, figuring we could tow him away from whatever was descending the slope. That was a mistake. I should have killed him. Guess I couldn't stomach the thought of breaking a promise, though. I've spent the better part of the last decade with the native peoples, broken bread with them, fished halibut out of the Yukon with them, even fell cross-eyed lovesick over one of them a while back. As a bootlegger, though, I'd wager most of my time spent with the locals has involved drinking. Plying my trade necessitated a sort of performative self-indulgence. It built my clientele. Amongst my regular customers, there was always a few undetermined souls. Kids that wouldn't imbibe, but wouldn't tattle to the authorities, neither. Those lukewarm naysayers were the ones I'd be drinking for. I'd flaunt my charisma, shake my proverbial tail feathers while pickling my innards in hooch. If I sung loud enough, and if I danced well enough, those formerly undetermined souls would be placing an order for our next clandestine delivery before I stumbled out the door. Yuka was one of those convicts. The only child or woman I'd fallen in love with. Matter of fact, got to know him well over the years. Boy was plucky, resourceful, slugged more than a few wet blankets at Ray's behest. He looked up to the both of us, apparently, was aspiring to get our attention for a long while. One night, Ray asked him if he'd like to join our little operation. Didn't clue me in on said proposal beforehand. The boy's eyes lit up, but he quickly steadied his expression, masking his elation. Unbecoming of a man to display such excitement. His mother was furious. In no uncertain terms, she informed me that if I took him in, tarnish his spirit with our unsavory ways, that we were through. With a heavy heart, I explained to her that it was Yuka's decision. It wasn't my place to intervene. So we parted ways. A few days later, she called me up, made me promise to keep him safe. I promised I would. Think that was the first and only time I lied to her. Ain't no leaving this particular type of life unscathed. In a grand, cosmic sense, her son had been dead for some time. He died the second I arrived at his home. Choked out his last breath when he peered up at me and saw something worthwhile. I raced over to my snowmobile. The noises emanating from the darkened hill grew louder. Creoic asterisk, pause, asterisk. Creoic asterisk, pause, asterisk. Creoic asterisk, pause, asterisk. Shoved the key into the ignition and twisted hard. The engine growled. I jumped on and drove around, parking the attached sled in front of Ray. All the while, Yuka hadn't budged an inch. He was still just a lumen above the fire, staring at the injured man posted against the pine tree. The swelling had reached his elbow. His forearm had tripled in size. The raw pressure of the accumulating fluid had misaligned his fingers. His middle and ring fingers were crossed in the shape of an X. His thumb was pointing backwards, hitchhiking towards his chest. I took the key out, stepped off the bike, and crept towards him, palms out to show Yuka I meant no harm. In the meantime, Ray was becoming volatile. Son, what the hell you gawking at? In a swift, jerky motion, the boy leaned in. Ray pushed himself back with the balls of his hands, grimacing as his mangled foot knocked into the cold dirt. W, what the fuck is wrong with your arm? He asked. Each of my movements was small and deliberate. I reached out to Ray. Yuka stilled. I felt Ray's fingers land across my palm. Suddenly, the boy's leg shot sideways, launching a clump of snow into the smoldering fire. Its glow whimpered, waned, and then gave out completely. Blackness surrounded us. The beginning of the end. There was a soft pop as the seams of Yuka's skin split. His hand wept, drizzling viscous tears onto Ray's parka, starting at the tip of ring finger. Yuka's flesh peeled away in 4 long, equally sized flaps, dainty and lush, blood petals in vibrant bloom, strips of lymph. Fatty skin fell into the snow, casting the limb in a steaming mist. I could barely appreciate the muscle and bone that remained beneath the seething mess of chaotic motion. Thousands of crystalline splinters skittered like starving termites over his arm, half brown, half white, each about the length of a sewing needle but thinner. They labored, skewer in muscle and tendon, organizing themselves with near robotic precision into tightly packed, fanning lines, one after the other, always with the brown half facing forward. Once organized, they stilled. Ray dug his nails into my palm. He discharged a wild scream. Yuka's body continued to unzip. The splinter's autonomous, rank-and-file self-arrangement followed only a few inches behind. Once the shedding reached his collarbone, he took a tiny, shivering step. All of the skin from the skull to his toes puckered, stretched, and then abandoned him completely with another, more climactic pop, and a bark-scaled devil emerged. Yuka's skin lay in molted tatters at its feet. I tried to pull my friend away. It was quicker. The devil's hand latched itself onto Ray's face. Its palm churned with fractal movement. Blood dripped heavy down his chin. The muffled screams grew shrill and animalistic. Nothing to be done at that point. I yanked my hand from his, fingernails clawing jagged tracks across my wrist, and sprinted to the snowmobile. It grumbled to life. I flicked on the headlights and swung around, readying to launch myself in a direction opposite the slope. I dragged the light across them in the process. The devil shot up at an unnatural, nausea-inducing speed, arms flipped forward and facing me. Ray flopped lifelessly into the snow. Before the edge of the beam passed him, I paused to turn and watched. The devil stayed perfectly still. Looked like a cardboard cutout that was missing a person's picture. Slowly, I slid clockwise. They shifted to counter the motion with a few awkward, creaking stomps. I let the engine sit, rumbling. No movement. 10 seconds. 20 seconds. I slammed the wheel to the left, hoping to catch them off guard. They moved to keep the light shining on their front, but a few shimmers managed to touch their back, which was diffusely chalk-white and seemed fleshy in comparison. A furious clicking sound radiated from the devil, not from their mouth, but their entire body. Their version of a scream, I'd reckon. Some of the white flesh turned ash-gray, like it had been burnt. They were trying to protect the white half of the splinters from the light. I idled for a moment, thinking. Then I heard it again. Creoic asterisk paused. Asterisk. I flicked on the high beams, illuminating the slope in a hazy glow. A dozen more devils were littered across the incline, each still as a statue in the exact same pose, and the cabin was conspicuously missing from the top of the hill. That's when it hit me. The cabin wasn't missing. Not really. They were the cabin. From the nearby snow, another devil began to appear, unfurling from Ray's corpse. Just half a face to start, but I'm confident more was coming. I pivoted and began driving away. As I turned, 13 and a quarter devils turned as well, creaking together in perfect unison, and despite my best efforts, I can't get that goddamned image out of my head. Saw another one on my way back. It was planted in the middle of an otherwise empty field, only 15 minutes from the outskirts of Anchorage, closest I've ever seen one come. On a whim, I decided to test a few things, but only because it felt safe to do so. The sunlight that morning was radiant and unfettered, not a single cloud in the sky. First, I tried to set the contemptible amalgamation ablaze. I had the booze, a lighter, and a few bits of flammable cloth. Figured I might as well. I lobbed the blazing cocktail at the cabin, the promise of vengeance swirling in my gut. It shattered against the poor excuse for a window with a brilliant explosion, but it would not catch. 4 firebombs later, and still nothing, despite mimicking a wooden structure. The splinters don't seem to share its chemical weaknesses. It makes me wonder if calling them splinters is misleading. A problem for someone smarter than me to dissect, no doubt. Next, I parked my snowmobile real close, about a foot away, and I flipped the high beams on. Wanted to see if additional light could damage it. They didn't react. No undulating, no clicking. Dumb hypothesis. But if it wasn't already abundantly clear, I ain't no scientist. My last test was the most perilous of the 3. It was also the most important. I positioned myself a safe distance away from the cabin, made sure my snowmobile was good on gasoline, turned the lights on, and waited for the sun to set. For a full hour of moonless night, they did not move. With my light on them, there remained a cabin, interlocked and benign. I took as deep a breath as I could muster and flicked the lights off. Didn't have to wait long. Within seconds, the structure was twisting on itself. The decomposition was more ferocious that time around, like they were angry, and that made me smile. A head with a pair of shoulders popped from the roof. A leg from a differently placed devil shot up beside the head. Then more heads, more shoulders, more legs, more hands, across each wall, across the roof, with no light to threaten their squishy backsides. The hideous puzzle deconstructed before my eyes. It was all the confirmation I needed. Credit where credit is due. There's a sort of terrible brilliance to design. The shape protects their soft, white underbellies. It also functions as camouflage, blending them into surroundings. And if anyone is foolish enough to touch it, well, that's just another devil to add to their ranks. I hopped on the bike, spun around, and headed towards Anchorage. Got one thing left to do now. Can't let Sakari wither away thinking her only son abandoned her. Here's to hoping she's still up there and hasn't suffered Yuka's fate already. Once I'd done that, I'm not sure what's next. Might finally give up smuggling for good and put what I've learned to use. With enough light, I could feasibly capture a colony of devils, keep them rigidly cabin-like. From there, maybe I could find somebody to study them, determine what the splinters are, and so forth. Feels like a pipe dream, but dreaming is the only thing keeping my head on straight. That said, I don't have any delusions about my destination after this life. Even if I single-handedly eradicate each and every devil, grind their splinters to dust, and bury it all deep within the earth, it still won't be enough to counterbalance the damage I've done. The drugs, the booze, Yuka, Sakari, but it's a start. Moreover, once I die, once I finally get condemned to an eternity of torment in the molten pits of hell, I'll be able to find Ray, and when I do, I'll be able to let him know, with a shit-eating grin spread wide across my jaw, that I died a little less of an asshole than he did.
Story 3. My new co-worker didn't blink once all night. I'll be entirely honest with you. I don't really know what to do right now. I just decided to write this on here. My hands are literally still shaking as I type this. I have no idea what happened to me today. For context, my name's Jack and I work at a bottle shop. It's actually not terrible work. For the most part, it's owned and operated independently as a small business, so I get pretty taken care of on payday. It's one of those bottle stores that operates as a drive-thru. Either a customer comes up to the counter with their alcohol, and I scan it through for them, or they pull up in the drive-thru, and I serve them with whatever they need. Anyways, there's this event in town at the moment. It's an annual thing, and the store has pretty much blown up. I can't really keep up with everything happening. So my boss said he was planning on hiring a new guy for me to work with on Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. Hence today's horrifying events. Earlier today at 4 p.m., I clocked in for a 3-hour shift. It was really business as usual. But being a Friday, I was definitely preparing to get slammed. As I clocked in on the computer in the back office, I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. I grabbed it and saw Sam Boss was phoning me. I clicked accept and put the phone to my ear. "Good afternoon," I offered warmly. "Hey mate, it's Sam. You clocking in now?" "Yep, just gotta work." "Easy. Listen, you're gonna love me for this. We're trialing a new employee tonight. He should be getting there any second. Name's Damien. You all good at showing the ropes?" "Thank God, Sam. I was literally just mentally preparing myself to get overrun with customers." "Yeah, I'll show him how everything's done." "No problems. Look, I'm on my way to that meeting I was telling you about, and I'm just about to hit a black spot. So I'll let you go. Give me a buzz after you clock out, and let me know how he went. Keep in mind, I'm in and out of meetings until just after 7, all right?" "No worries, Sam. Thanks again. See you." And that was that. Goddamn, I wish I could go back. Turn around and never have stepped foot into the store that night. But I did. I walked out of the office and into the main part of the store and saw a short, slightly chubby man standing behind the counter, looking at me. There he is. "Damien," I exclaimed as I went up and shook his hand. "That's right, what's your name?" he responded excitedly. "I'm Jack. It's nice to meet you, mate. Let me show you around." The first thing I noticed about Damien was his smile. All the teeth in his mouth seemed visible, and his smile literally never seemed to waver. I don't actually remember ever seeing him with a straight face. As I showed him around, I tried to get to know him a little bit. "Whereabouts are you from, Damien?" I asked. "Not from around here," was all he responded with. "Yeah, cool. How'd you find out about this job?" "I just saw the opportunity," he said, his smile quivering. I just nodded at that. I didn't really seem to get straight answers to the questions I was asking. Instead, he would respond exclusively in a manner which operated to provide as little information as possible. I finished showing him where everything was, and we returned to the counter. To be honest, the shift started pretty slow, but Damien and I actually struck a bit of a good system. We would trade customers so as to stagger the workload between the two of us, and whenever one of us wasn't with a customer, the other would be stocking the shelves. Not long after the system was engaged, I realized how clueless he was with interacting with these customers. I honestly just assumed that maybe he didn't have a customer service background or something. But this guy was at least in his 40s. I wasn't sure how anyone could get to that age and be as poor in customer relations as this gentleman. For example, this one guy came in, and Damien didn't even initiate the interaction. He stood there smiling at him, waiting for the customer to tell him what he wanted without any provocation. That struck me as really odd. About half an hour went by, and then service really started to pick up. People were coming home from work around that time. So I underwent what I usually did on weekends, a battering. We continued to trade customers, and although his social skills weren't great, the system was working. I found that I was having to work a lot less hard than I usually did. Then something strange happened. I waved goodbye to a usual customer, and this older lady Damien had just served pulled over to the side of the drive-thru. I saw her arm stick out her window, followed by her head. She looked right at me and waved me over. A little bit thrown, I walked over to her, preparing to get yelled at for one reason or another. "Hi, mate," she said in a gravelly voice. "Look, not to be an asshole or anything, but you might want to review the performance of your colleague over there." She pointed vaguely in the direction he was standing. He was facing away from us doing absolutely nothing, but even from the back of his head and the way his cheeks looked, I could tell he was smiling. He didn't say a bloody word to me. He just stared at me for ages, then silently went and got my things after I blurted out what I wanted. He also didn't stop smiling once. Yeah, this is his first shift. I think he's just nerve dashed, but I didn't get to finish what I was saying, as we were both looking in his direction. And as I was speaking, a tooth fell out of his mouth. A single tooth. It fell in front of him and bounced off the box that was at his feet, landing just beside him. Me and the woman were stunned. We just watched for a few more seconds. Love, I don't know what the fuck is happening here, but be careful. I've got to run, but seriously be careful. She peeled out of the drive-thru, leaving me shocked and alone. I probably watched him for at least 2 or 3 more minutes, which doesn't sound like a long time, but trust me when I say it is. In a silent drive-thru, watching a smiling man stare aimlessly into the back of a fridge, it was just bizarre. I finally pulled up the courage to continue about my work. After that customer, we hit a huge quiet patch. I went to the fridges on the opposite side of the store and began to load them. After a little bit, I heard him moving over to the other side of the shop. I looked over and saw he'd shuffled over to behind the counter now. For fuck's sake, I thought, now he's facing right in my direction. I continued to load the fridge, and Damien did not stop staring at me for even 1 second. He didn't break eye contact. I could see in my peripheral vision that his outline remained facing towards me, smiling and observing. For 1 split second, I mustered up the guts to glance in his direction, and saw a missing front tooth. My stomach genuinely sank. It was the worst feeling, just as I returned to my work. I heard the gentle rumbling of an engine as a car pulled up in the drive-thru. I heard absolutely no movement from behind me in Damien's direction, meaning it was clearly up to me to greet and serve the customer. Shakily, I walked to the driver's side window and said my usual greetings. As the customer was telling me what he wanted, I heard a clink and tapping sound coming from behind me. I immediately knew what it was, but I still had to turn around to check. Unsurprisingly, he continued to smile, but now there were 2 gaps in his mouth. He'd lost another tooth. "Why?" The guy in the car shouted. "Mate, I was talking to you." "Sorry, mate." I responded, still looking at Damien. He just stared at me and smiled. He didn't blink. He didn't even seem to be breathing. The customer repeated what he wanted. And then it dawned on me that in order for me to scan it, though, I was going to have to go up to the counter and stand right next to that creep. A pang of nerves hit my gut, but I had to do what I had to do. I grabbed his drinks from the fridge and made my way around the back of the counter. Of course, the scan tool decided to shit itself right as I was using it, so I had to stuff around for even longer than I planned on doing. He was right next to me, but I didn't look at him once. I was too scared. I walked around and gave the customer his stuff, and he sped away without so much as a thank you. Finally, the clock on the wall ticked over to 6:55 p.m., and it was time to close. As I turned around to grab the keys from the counter, I yelled. He had been standing right behind me. For F-U-C-K's sake, Damien. I yelled. I was scared. I actually don't know why I yelled that. He didn't change. He continued to smile. I just need to lock up and get out of here, I thought to myself. I walked around and with a newfound sense of bravery, grabbed the keys and went over to the roller doors. I went around, locking everything, not even caring to check on the whereabouts of my colleague. As I crouched down to lock the last roller door into place, I noticed I had goosebumps. I wasn't even sure why. Then my blood ran cold as I looked in the reflection of the fridge in front of me. That motherfucker was right behind me. My fight or flight reaction kicked in. I turned around, punched him in his liver, and sprinted as fast as I physically could to the nearest lockable door, the bathroom. As I rounded the corner to the back, I heard heavy footsteps behind me. Way too heavy to proportionally match Damien's stature. Way too fast to be human. I threw the men's bathroom door open and slammed it behind me, locking it on instinct. No sooner had I locked the door than a deafening bang sounded upon it. He was right outside. Words cannot describe the fear I was in. I'm not usually easily scared or anything, and I don't think that my recounting of these events does justice to the horror that would be felt under the circumstances. There was silence for a second, and then an extensive series of bangs rang out on the door. It was like there were 10 men out there all banging on the door at once. It was such a strong sound. Slowly it picked up in pace. Soon the banging was occurring at a seemingly impossible speed. There is not a single chance that whatever was out there was human. No human in the world could ever hit the door as hard and fast as he was. Then finally, it stopped. Silence. I saw the door handle tremble slowly. I remember thinking to myself, is he just trying to open the door? The trembling stopped, and so too did the commotion of the evening. I probably called Sam like 7 or 8 times, but he didn't pick up at all. I stayed there in that bathroom for hours. I was way too scared to do anything. In retrospect, I have no idea why I didn't just call the cops. My adrenaline was so spiked that the only option in my mind was to call Sam for some reason. Finally, after eternity, my phone buzzed. It was Sam. I answered straight away. Before I could say anything, his voice rang loudly into my ear. Jack, I know you're probably frustrated, but that's no way to respond to a situation outside of my control. I've been in and out of meetings all evening. You knew that. Jesus, were you so busy you couldn't handle the drive-thru on your own? Sam, you have no idea what happened. He was fucking crazy. I think I need to call the cops. Just as I was about to launch into informing him of the night's events, his words turned over in my mind. Wait, Sam, what the fuck are you talking about? What do you mean I couldn't handle the drive-thru on my own? Jack, I've already apologized that the trainee didn't show up. He said he was sick and wouldn't be able to come in. Still no reason to give me an earful for it. My stomach dropped. The new guy never showed up? What? No, he didn't show up. He was sick. He said he'd come in next weekend to trial with you. Sorry you've got to do another weekend on your own, mate. His words sat like a ton of bricks in the air. I hung up on him. I swung open the door and looked at the door handle. It had bite marks on it, of a very specific formation. The bite indentations on the wood had one upper tooth missing and one lower tooth missing. I checked everywhere in the store. There was no sign of a struggle. Whatever was just vanished. I don't know where it went. Every time I think about what went down tonight, the realization just sets it on me again. The real trainee never showed. I have no idea who or what I worked with tonight. Story 4. My husband brought a Ouija board home. It changed our lives forever. My husband, Connor, and I have always been huge horror aficionados. Ever since I was a child, I've been a fan of the gruesome and the macabre. Almost anything goes. Almost. Connor knows that I only have one rule when it comes to Halloween. No clowns, and absolutely no Ouija boards. Not in the house, not in the yard, not in the forest behind our home. But apparently, even though I've been drilling it into him since we started dating, that was too difficult for him to understand. "Hey babe, I'm home," Connor said, tossing his keys in the bowl by the door. "Welcome back." I replied from my place on the couch. "So you'll never guess what I won as a prize at work today," he said as he rounded the corner. My heart dropped a second. He came into view. "No. Get out of my house," I snapped, pointing to the door. Connor's expression dropped, the Ouija board falling to his side. But I thought it'd be fun, just this once. I made direct eye contact with him, a raging fire in my eyes. "Connor, you know how I feel about Ouija boards. I had a traumatic experience when I was a kid. Now please do as I ask and get out of the house. I don't want that thing anywhere near me." Connor sighed. "Fine, you win. It's going back in my truck," he said, disappearing from view. I picked up my wine glass and took a large swig. I love that man, but he really knows how to push my buttons. We both had off work the next day. We were each hanging out with separate friend groups, so I didn't know what he was up to. I trusted him. Part of me wishes I hadn't. His poor decisions at night changed our lives forever. When Connor got home, it was nearly 3 in the morning. The kids had spent the night at their grandparents' house, so it was just the two of us. I thought that maybe after Connor tumbled into bed, we might have a little time to be intimate. I was dead wrong. I was already lying down by the time Connor walked through the door. I had been snuggled under the covers with the lights off, doom scrolling on Instagram and waiting to make sure that he made it home safely. I listened as the front door opened and shut. Then I heard the faint creak of the stairs. It sounded like he was trying to be quiet, which I appreciated. He was being considerate because I might be asleep. Now, I know that wasn't the reason. The footsteps stopped just outside the room. I heard shuffling, as if someone was pacing back and forth. I kept expecting the door to open and for my husband to be standing there, a big goofy grin plastered across his face. But that didn't happen. I wanted to yell out to him or turn on the bedside lamp, but it felt wrong. I couldn't shake the feeling that if I took my eyes off the door for even a second, something bad was going to happen. I don't know how long I sat there in the dark, illuminated by nothing by my phone screen. Then, just as I thought my heart might explode from anticipation, it happened. The doorknob started to turn. The door creaked open, and I could make out the silhouette of my husband standing in the entryway. He didn't say a word to me. He bolted over to the bed, kicked off his shoes, and threw himself beneath the covers, facing the wall. I was stunned. It had all happened so fast. "Honey, is everything okay?" He didn't answer. He just nodded his head. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. This behavior wasn't like the Connor that I knew. I stared at him, waiting for him to say something, to give me some sort of explanation. But he didn't move. He just stayed there, still as a statue. I didn't take my eyes off him until I heard him start to snore. Eventually, I lulled myself into a false sense of security. I had to in order to get to sleep. I told myself that Connor was just wasted. His friends did drink quite a bit when they hung out. That thought helped put my mind at ease. Until the next morning, I awoke to find the side of the bed empty. The smell of bacon wafting upstairs from the kitchen immediately caught my attention. My assumption about him must have been correct. Connor was hungover and needed some greasy food to get himself back to normal. I took my time getting ready before meeting him in the kitchen. He had his back to me when I took a seat at the table, a plate full of bacon sitting beside him on the counter. "Morning," he said, flipping a pancake. "Morning. You want to tell me what all that was about last night?" I replied, eyeing him. He turned to face me, his brows furrowed. "What do you mean?" "What do you mean, what do I mean? You came up to our room last night acting really weird. You didn't say a word to me. Then you went to sleep with your clothes on. Huh, I don't remember that. Must have been more drunk than I thought. There it was. I had no reason to worry. Thought so. How'd the boys' night go? I asked, standing to brew myself a cup of coffee. Decent. We got wasted and played with that Ouija board I won. Don't worry, I left it at Mike's house. My stomach dropped. Oh, really? And did you contact anything? I dreaded his answer. My throat had gone dry, and I suddenly found myself clinging to every word. I thought we did at one point, but I'm pretty sure it was just Aaron moving the planchette. He tried to pretend like it was this entity called Mr. Pip. So stupid, right? A cold sweat enveloped my entire body at the mention of that name. I had to sit down to stop myself from passing out. No! I muttered, head in my hands. This can't be happening. Not again. Connor seemed okay after that. For the next week, I searched for any indication that he wasn't right. Something to clue me in that this thing had returned. I watched him like a hawk. The only thing out of the ordinary was that Connor stayed in the bathroom for a suspiciously long time one day after work. But it turned out that it was just constipation from the Taco Bell he'd eaten at lunch. Nothing paranormal about that. After a whole week passed, I let myself believe that Friday night was just a fluke. I should have been more careful. I came home that Monday after a grueling shift, ready to turn on a rom-com and pour myself a glass of Cabaret. I'm home, I shouted, kicking off my shoes. I received no response. That was odd. The kid should have been there. And Connor's car was in the driveway. I rounded the corner to the kitchen, brows knitted in confusion. My heart dropped when I found Alice and Tommy sitting at the table, their faces pale as sheets. "Mom," Tommy whispered. His voice was low, as if he was afraid to speak too loudly. "What is it, sweetie? What's wrong?" I said, rushing over to him. "It's Daddy," Alice interjected. She was choking back tears. He's being really scary. He told us to stay here and wait for him to get done. I was suddenly blanketed in a cold wave of dread. I didn't like where this was going. "He didn't hurt you, did he?" I asked, studying their expressions. They both shook their heads no. I breathed a sigh of relief. "All right, I'll go see what's wrong. Don't worry, okay? I won't let anything happen to you." They shared a glance before giving me a grim nod. Adrenaline coursed through my veins as I proceeded toward my room, just to be safe. I grabbed the baseball bat lying by the door that Tommy had forgotten to put away. My heart pounded in my chest with each step I climbed. I didn't know what I was going to find when I opened that door, but it certainly was not the scene that I walked into. I eventually reached the top landing and stood outside my bedroom. I pressed my ear to the door and listened, but I couldn't hear anything. "Come on, Hannah. Just get it over with. It'll all be over soon." I mustered up every ounce of courage I had, and I burst into the room. I was shocked at what I saw. My husband stood in front of the vanity mirror. He was applying a fresh layer of makeup, clown makeup. His face was stark white with black streaks running down from his eyes like he'd been crying motor oil. He wore a polka-dotted jumpsuit with a red, scraggly wig and big floppy shoes. This couldn't be happening. It had to be some kind of nightmare. The second I entered, I froze, and he turned toward me. "Connor, what is this? What are you doing?" The clown began to giggle. "It's been such a long time, Annie. It's good to see you again." He was using Connor's vocal cords, but that voice was not the one I knew. It was higher pitched, yet soft, like an entertainer speaking to a child. All the color drained from my face. I raised the baseball bat, prepared to swing. "That's not my name. You give me my husband back, you sick freak." The thing wearing my Connor skin frowned, its big red lips drooping animatedly. "Annie, is that really the way to treat your long-lost pal? Mr. Pitt missed you." I couldn't take it anymore. I swung as hard as I could, tears blurring my vision. I missed, lurching forward as the bat crashed into the bed frame. I instantly knew that I'd messed up, because a second later, I felt the cool, sharp glint of a blade against my throat. "Listen here. You will do what Mr. Pip asks, or he will drive the tip of this knife into your skull while your children watch. Do you really want that, Annie?" My breath hitched in my throat. "No." "Good girl," he said, shoving me away. "Downstairs. Now." I immediately thought to call the cops, but he was right behind me. I couldn't get to my phone without him seeing. Instead, I was forced to march down the stairs and over to the table where my children sat, petrified. The clown led me to a chair beside Tommy, while he claimed one beside Alice. My heart shattered for my baby girl. I couldn't imagine how scared she must have been. Hello again, kids. Mr. Pip is happy to see you. He didn't receive a response. I said. He growled, pounding his fist on the table. Mr. Pip is happy to see you. He scowled at my children, who each wore a horrified expression. I'm happy to see you too, Mr. Pip, Tommy murmured, avoiding eye contact. Good. Was that so hard? His large, exaggerated smile returned as if it had never left. Tommy shook his head. Now, Annie, if you'll be so kind, will you get Mr. Pip a glass of water? He's parched. I nodded. Before I stood, I slipped Tommy my phone on the table, praying he'd know what to do. Tommy was a smart kid. He was our only shot. Did you children know that your mommy and Mr. Pip were on television together? Annie was the star of the show. Though I wanted to scream with every fiber of my being, I didn't utter a peep. I simply poured a glass of water and walked back to the table. This thing, it was using my husband as a vessel to get to me. I just had to play into its little game, and everything would turn out okay, right? Mr. Pip? Tommy said, his voice shaky. Yes, Tommy, he replied, turning his attention to my son. Can I go to the bathroom? Our captor thought it over, eyes traveling to the ceiling, knife tapping absent-mindedly against his chin. Mr. Pip supposes that would be all right, but hurry back. You wouldn't want to miss out on the fun. Tommy nodded, then trotted away, acting like he really had to pee. I couldn't have been more proud in that moment, but then I was reminded of the task at hand. I returned to the table and handed the glass of water to the clown, who had my daughter at knife point. I watched as he took a sip. Then my heart dropped. His face immediately twisted, and a deep frown overtook his countenance. He shot up from his chair, locking eyes with me. This is warm. Without breaking eye contact, he smashed the glass on the floor. Try again. I trembled as I did what he asked. I waited for the water to get cold. Then I threw in a couple of ice cubes from the freezer for good measure. My hand shook as I handed over the new glass. The clown greedily snatched it up. He downed the entire thing, ice cubes and all, before looking me directly in the eyes. Much better. He grinned. Something in that smile felt deeply sinister. It only grew wider as he smashed the second glass on the ground. Take off your shoes. What? Take off your shoes, he repeated in a sickly sweet sing-song voice. But I did as I was asked. I don't dash. Take them off. You're making Mr. Pip very angry, Annie. You wouldn't want that now, would you? He asked, his eyes falling to Alice. I shook my head. No. I stripped off my shoes and tossed them aside. Socks too. I could feel the blood pounding in my ears as I obeyed his commands. Now walk, he said, pointing to the room over, that twisted grin so wide that his face paint was cracking. Please, don't make me do this, I said, tears welling in my eyes. Don't make Mr. Pip repeat himself. Walk. I glanced at him through the tears, blurring my vision. He was standing behind Alice's chair now, knife on full display. I had to do this. I couldn't let him hurt my daughter. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, and plunged my bare foot forward into the hundreds of glass shards littering the floor. My eyes shot back open as the pain seared through my foot like lightning. I yelped, instinctively pulling it back. Keep going, the clown demanded. The eager glimmer in his eyes made me want to vomit. He was reveling in this. I gritted my teeth and leaned on the table for support. I motioned to place my hurt foot back down, but I didn't get the chance. Not that one. Now it's time to put your best foot forward. He cackled, his boisterous laughter reverberating off the walls. No one else so much as twitched. I turned back to find a knife pressed to Alice's side. Her eyes were wide, and her bottom lip was trembling. I didn't have a choice. I applied pressure to my injured foot, a debilitating pain roaring through every synapse. I leaned even harder on the table, grateful at least for that tiny blessing. I hovered my right foot over the broken glass for a moment. Before I took the next step, I released an audible shriek as my right foot was sliced to ribbons. A pool of blood had blossomed around me, mingling with the spilled water and glass fragments. Everything hurt. I nearly collapsed, but somehow I remained standing. I glared back at the sadistic clown, holding a knife to my daughter's neck. Very good, Annie. I hated that voice. I hated him. But that phrase, as much as I loathed it, gave me a little sense of comfort. Maybe he was satisfied. Maybe that was it. Now do it again. A cold dread swallowed me like a python. This couldn't be happening. What? You heard me, Mr. Pip said. Do it again. Stars swam in my vision as I glanced back at the mess on the floor. I was losing a lot of blood. I didn't know how much more I could take. I turned, wincing as a glass shard shifted beneath my flesh, and I prepared to follow his command. The pain was so immobilizing that I felt like I was going to pass out. I lifted my left foot, droplets of blood falling to the ground. I squeezed my eyes shut and, "Police, drop your weapon." That sound was music to my ears. I looked at the thing in my husband's body. His smile had melted into a deep frown, but we were having so much fun. Oh well, goodbye, Annie. For now. I watched as the menacing glint left his eyes. His demeanor changed in an instant. The clown blinked a couple of times. Then his eyes fell to the knife. He seemed shocked to be holding it. He let it slip to the floor as the officers moved in. "Hannah? What's going on? Why is there so much blood on the floor? Why am I wearing this?" A new kind of horror struck me in that moment. My Connor was back. The sweet, loving husband and father that I knew, and he was being led away in cuffs. It's been 2 months since Connor's arrest, and I'm still having trouble processing what happened. It took a long time to heal from my injuries. I needed stitches, and I had to stay off of my feet for weeks. The kids haven't had any interest in visiting their father while he's been detained. I don't blame them either. His decision to use that Ouija board opened a wound that we can never close. The trauma inflicted that day will last a lifetime. Even so, I know that my husband isn't the bad guy. He's a victim too. God, I wish I could just make all of this go away. I want to go back to being a big, happy family again. But I know that we can't do that. And I have a feeling that as bad as things are now, they're just going to get worse. Because I can't shake the last thing that clown told me from my head. Goodbye, Annie. For now. Story 5. The Man at the End of the Path. I used to think the city had rules. Little invisible rules. Where sidewalks turned into alleys. Where streetlights came every 100 feet. Where the hum of traffic became a blanket you could pull over your ears. I believe those rules kept chaos at a distance. I learned the truth the hard way. My route was simple. Out the front door, left along Hawthorne. 2 blocks of the Riverwalk, around the old boathouse, up past the warehouses and home. It was a half-hour loop, a route so memorized it was almost muscle memory. I liked walking alone at night because it cleared my head. The office would be a mold of fluorescent light the next day, and the walk was permission to be something else for a little while. The first few months I did this, I hardly noticed anyone else. There were the usual figures. The lonely man in the blue jacket who always fed pigeons at the corner. The couple who argued in low voices and then held hands like nothing had happened. Once a week a delivery truck idled by the warehouse, and a driver would smoke a cigarette like a ritual. Familiarity made me complacent in small, useful ways. Familiarity made the city comfortable. The first night, I noticed him. It didn't feel like I noticed so much as a shift in the air, a sliding of a stage curtain that made everything else look different. He stood at the far end of the path near the water, where the river curved and the lights thinned. My first thought was practical. A fisherman, a late jogger catching his breath. He was a shadow more than person at that point, a dark outline against a darker background. But even from 40 meters away, I noticed two things. His posture was wrong, and he was looking straight at me. It wasn't a casual glance. The kind of look that says you are an object to be measured. It put the hair on my arms up. I looked away because that's what you do in the city, ignore people. I told myself to keep walking. I did not. I kept walking because after 10 minutes you want to finish the route. You want the quiet house again. You want to pretend nothing unusual ever happened. But I found my pace slowed. I found myself counting the lamps between me and the boathouse. 3 lampposts. 2. 1. The man did not move. He stood like a punctuation mark at the very end of the path. By the time I reached the old concrete bench, I realized he was still there, exactly where I'd left him. And then he smiled. Not a polite smile. Not a city smile. It was small and private, like someone holding a secret between teeth. That was the moment my stomach went cold. Not because of the smile itself. People smile for terrible reasons all the time, but because there was a current to his smile. It was earned, rehearsed, like a fisherman who knows the exact knot to tie to catch a certain type of fish. I kept walking. I pretended I was late. I told myself he would be gone when I turned the corner. He was not. The next few nights became exercises in small horrors. He was there at the end of the path again and again, and each time I saw him, his smile had the same lean precision. Sometimes he would be farther away, sometimes closer. Sometimes he would be leaning against the railing, looking at the river. Once he cupped his hands to his mouth and whistled a single, short note. It sounded like a question mark. I started to change the route. The shortest path felt contaminated. I took alleys with thicker light. I walked with my phone between my fingers, even though the battery was almost always dying. I stopped looking at the water. The river had become a possibility rather than a place. But discomfort is patient. It waits. A week in, I found the first sign that it wasn't just me interpreting harmless quirks as threat. My neighbor, a woman named Emily on the 3rd floor, asked if I had seen that guy by the boathouse. Her voice had a strange, brittle edge I'd never heard from her. She described him the way you describe a bruise. I saw him last Tuesday. He stood there for an hour like something fixed in place. I thought maybe he was sleeping at first, but when I crossed the bridge, he looked up and smiled at me. It was like he already knew I believed something about him. She stopped speaking as if words had become dangerous when pronounced aloud. We both knew we were using the same word without saying it. Wrong. We started to notice things that weren't smiles. A discarded glove near the bridge. A shoe on the other side of the path facing toward the city, not the water. A mark on a lamppost. 2 parallel scratches that looked like a shorthand scribble. None of these were threats on their own. A glove could belong to anyone, but collected like bones on a table. They compose an uneven sentence. I began carrying pepper spray, which made me feel more adult than brave. Emily started walking earlier. She began to leave a light on the balcony each night, and would sometimes shout a little to prove to herself she wasn't alone. It's important to tell you the timeline here, because fear grows like a plant in drainage. Gradually, then suddenly. For 3 weeks, nothing else happened. The man stayed. We avoided him. The city kept being the city. Then, on a Tuesday with rain, the pattern broke. I was late. The office had spilled into overtime, and the sky had darkened into a slow, gray wash. I took the river walk because the other roads were clogged. The rain had thinned everyone's numbers. He stood knee-deep in shadow near the boathouse, and when he saw me approach, he lifted a hand, palm outward as if waving hello. His smile matched the motion, small, internal, private, but his eyes were different. They were too bright, like lanterns seen through fog. I felt foolish for being afraid in the face of a human gesture. And then he called my name. He said it with precision that implied he had been practicing this favor for a long time. David. My name, not a nickname. Not the safer, less particular form. He said my name the way someone says the last line of a poem. My breath snagged. I hadn't told anyone I had a name I went by after college. I hadn't told people at the office. The fact that he said it like it was a private code made every rule I had about privacy and safety crumble a little. David. He said again, softer, "You always take the river walk." The reasonable thing to do would have been to turn and go, to sprint, to call our building security, to do any of the dozens of ordinary things a person does when a stranger knows their name. Instead, I found myself walking toward him. As though the city's small rules were a string, I kept tugging on to see how it would behave. Up close, he looked like someone assembled from parts of other people. A face whose features were vaguely familiar, but never quite right. A nose the precise what you'd expect from a suit, a jaw that suggested he was used to smiling for the camera rather than for people. He smelled faintly of gasoline and something cleaner, ammonia or bleach, like he had been carrying different fabrics. His clothes were ordinary, a dark jacket, jeans. No bag, nothing that suggested where he had been. He smiled. "You're late tonight," he said. "You can't be late forever." I laughed, but it came out small. "Do I know you?" He shrugged in a careful, slow way. "You already do. We all do." His eyes were too steady. "I like this path," he said. "It's honest." I told myself then, because the brain likes scaffolding, that he probably worked nearby and was lonely or had been on some long, aimless walk. I told myself he might be strange but harmless. I told myself that's what people always say in the story before it becomes something else. I said those lines out loud like talismans. He tilted his head in a manner that suggested gratitude. "If you walk later, you will see more," he said. I asked him what he meant. He cupped his hand and pointed at the dark water. "Where the light ends is a place for little things to be forgotten," he said. "If you know how to look at them, you can make them belong again." His smile sharpened then, like the closing of a camera iris. I felt the hair on my arms rise. There are certain metaphors that are fine in books, and metaphors poisonous in conversation. This was one of them. I told myself I was being dramatic. I told myself it was raining, and every strange thing looks like a story in rain. I walked home with a sense that I had passed through a narrow doorway. That night, I did not sleep well. I dreamed of riverbanks with small piles of shoes, of miles of abandoned umbrellas, standing like soldiers. I dreamed a man at the boathouse walking with a cart and setting things down with reverence, arranging them like offerings. 3 days later, Emily knocked on my door at 8 in the morning. She looked like someone who had been scraping frost from glass and had found a live thing under the ice. Her hands trembled. She had 2 paper bags, one with coffee, one with something wrapped in tissue. "I don't know what to do," she said. "I found on the path." I took the tissue carefully. Inside was a small battered cassette tape, the plastic case clouded with fine scratches. There was a handwritten label for later, stupid, useless handwriting. My first thought was nostalgia. There was an old mixtape culture, a private economy of tapes and notes. But then I saw the corners. They were damp. The tape smelled faintly of river and rust. We debated whether to open it. There's a dangerous grammar to curiosity, the way it pronounces possibility in your head like a lit fuse. In the end, we popped into my old boombox because 2 people who have lived on the same path learned to use each other as resistors. We pressed play. Silence at first, then a soft voice, male, very close to the microphone. A small pause, a breath, then the sound of river, very close and suddenly enormous in recording, as if the tape had captured not a river but an ocean. Low static. Then the voice returned, again the same softness. "You found it," the voice said. "You're the one I think of. Keep walking when the lamps go out." A laugh, gentler than a chuckle. They stopped seeing each other when the city gets quiet. The voice went on. "Little things collect, if you know how to place them right." There was a sound like paper folding, the careful slide of something being arranged on cloth. "You can put them back where they belong. Keep the path honest." At the end of the cassette, a sound roared. A small, animal sound, and then something like a metal object scraping along a long rail. It was abruptly cut. We sat in silence for a long minute. The tape was wrong in 100 small ways. The voice on the tape was him. The cadence, the private, practiced smile in his words. We listened to that line again about keeping the path honest until it made our mouths feel like something sour. We brought the tape to the police. They were kind but corporate, used the indignation, and less used to the sediment of private fear. They wrote a report, gave me a number. We'll check the area, the officer said. He had the look of someone who wants to be helpful while also protecting his time. We gave them the tape. 2 days later, we received a call that their patrols had found nothing. No items, no evidence, no man. The city is sometimes a sieve. It filters what it wants to keep and discards the rest. The police believed the physical realm. The physical realm gave them nothing. So we were left with an uncanny object and the feeling of a sentence left incomplete. It did what uncanny objects do best. It made a place into a story and then made the story personal. The nights changed after that. The boathouse hummed with a sensitivity. People started to remove their jackets more quickly. The couple who argued stopped emerging from midnight walks. An old man who used to sleep on a bench started feeding his birds earlier, as if the light at midnight had become unreliable. The city rearranged itself around the memory of the tape. One night, a week after the police call, I saw him kneeling by the lamppost near the third bridge. He had a crate of things with him, small, deliberate objects wrapped in cloth. When he saw me, he didn't stand. He lifted his face and there was blood along the corner of his mouth, like somebody had used his teeth as a tool. It was the first time he looked unpracticed. "David," he said softly. I tried to keep calm. "What are you doing with those things?" I asked. He put a gloved finger to his lips. "Sure," he said. "Don't have to know the name of everything you see. You only need to know they are placed." It was childish and diplomatic and absolutely insane. He had a method. He had the grace of a tidy ritual. He set one of the wrapped objects on the base of the lamp, then another on the bench, then a row of small things along the railing. Each placement was like a punctuation mark. Then he stood. He walked toward me with the careful, measured gait of someone performing an exercise. When he was a few feet away, he reached into a jacket and pulled out a small photograph. It was old and faded. On it, in a faint sepia, was a child with a bright hat beside a woman whose face had been scratched away, as if someone had taken a pencil and drawn lines through the features. The edges of the photograph had been browned with water. "I used to forget faces sometimes," he said. "There's a terrible ache to that. The city forgets what it doesn't want and then pretends things never existed. I make things belong." I felt something, not quite rage, not quite pity, something like being spoken by a strange weather. "What does that mean?" I asked. He smiled. "If something is misplaced, you can put it back. If a face is erased, you can set a photograph near the place where it should be, and the world will remember it again for a while." I should have walked away. I should have run. Instead, I took the photograph. Curious the way people are curious at the foot of the cliff, and I looked at the place where the woman's face had been scraped away. The paper was rough as a wound. For a moment, just a flicker, I thought I saw the ghost of a face in scratches, a map of what had been removed. It wasn't a face I knew, but the idea of it made me dizzy. He reached out and with one finger tapped the photograph, like striking a bell. "Place it at the bridge," he said. "Tonight, place it where the light falls least." There are moments in life when the rational world hands you a fork with impossible prongs. Most people take the safe path. They put the fork down. They choose the comfortable option, and they sleep. Some people, however, choose out of exhaustion or perverse curiosity. That night I chose. The next day the photograph was gone. Not stolen, not carried away, simply not there. The seam was empty, as if whatever had been placed there had never existed. My stomach dropped. I walked to the police station because that's what you do when you've done a ridiculous thing your better judgment already knew was foolish. They pretended to listen. Paper was filed. Hands were wrung. An officer offered me tea. 2 more photographs disappeared from the city in the following week. An old glove, carefully folded and placed on a windowsill at dusk, vanished by morning. A single child's shoe appeared on a rooftop, and then was not there when the sun rose. People began to speak about small things in new, reverent tones, the way you speak about a shrine. A whisper climbed through the neighborhood. He is making them belong again. But the word that slipped closest to the truth, the word that fewer people used because it tasted like a throat that had closed, was this: replacement. Replacement is an ugly verb. To replace is to take one thing and put another in its place. You can replace a bulb. You can replace a lock. You can't replace a person. Or at least you can't in any ethical vocabulary that matters. We began to suspect the man was not simply keeping memory. He was assembling it differently. The city has many inhabitants who will not punish imagination. The man, whatever he was one of those beings. He had found a way to manufacture a story until the story became more persuasive than the truth. People eventually stopped walking after dark. The cafes closed earlier. The warehouses across the river taped flyers that read, "Do not leave objects unattended, and if you see something, call." The man's appearances became less frequent, and therefore more notable. Like an eclipse you notice even though it is small. One night, months in, I confronted him. I found him under the bridge, where the cold collects and the light is merciless. He had a cart then, a small hand cart, piled with things wrapped in gray cloth. He looked larger in the weak light, as if the absence of brightness made his outline more meaningful. He watched me approach with the same mild attentiveness, like a merchant considering a customer. "You can't keep doing this," I said. He looked at me like someone acknowledging an old acquaintance. "Why not?" he asked. "Because it's not." I started, then stopped. Words are often inadequate when the thing they name is monstrous. "Because people are missing," I said. "Things disappear. Faces are ruined. You can't." He put a hand on the cart, soft and certain. "I put them where they belong," he said. "Some things cannot live with the way they were arranged. They hate their position. They stay wrong. I set them." "You set them?" I repeated. He tapped the cart lightly. "We all make mistakes with placement. A child lost here. A photograph misplaced there. The world forgets because no one takes the time to place things neatly. I placed them so they will be seen." The thing he said next is the thing I remember like a pressure in my throat. He said it without drama, with the tone of someone talking about cooking. "Do you want to see what happens when you don't?" The cart hummed open like a lid. He reached into a bundle and unwrapped the thing tenderly. It was a small cloth doll, one of those homemade things with button eyes. But its face had been removed, the stitches torn like someone had unpicked a seam. Where its face should be there was a small, dark aperture, the inside like a throat. He smiled then, and his smile looked almost like the one from the first night, but older, as if it had collected seasons. "When something is wrong, they make noise," he said. "They gnaw until the city notices. I quiet them. There's a cruelty that is mechanical. There's another cruelty that is accidental." The man seemed practiced both. For the first time since noticing him, I felt something like anger. I shoveled it up inside me. "You arrested someone for this?" he asked, amused. "For making them belong?" "I don't know what you are," I said, "but you have to stop." He looked genuinely surprised. "Oh," he said. "Stop? Who would I answer to? The city?" He waved at the water, like a man waving at a river. "Do you know what is harder than placing things?" he asked. "Letting them rot where they will be forgotten. That's worse." He put the doll back in the cart with a tenderness that made my skin crawl. After that night, the city refused to be easy. A woman 2 blocks over reported waking to the sound of something scraping at her window at 3 in the morning. A local bar posted a photograph of a missing man on its board. The man with the cart was seen less and less in public, and more often on the roofs at the margins, delivering his small packages like an itinerant priest. And then, finally, something happened that changed the shape of our fear from unease into a concrete, cold dread. Emily did not come back from a run. She left at dawn, like she always did, with a playlist in her ears and a pair of earbuds tucked in when she crossed the bridge. She was due back in 40 minutes for coffee at the corner store. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Her key was still in the apartment door. The police found her headphones near the lamppost. Her watch was under the bench. No sign of a struggle. No blood. Only an emptiness that seemed to spread like spilled water. For a week the city emptied of small pleasures. People called in to work. Flowers lay at the bridge and were gone by the morning. Someone chalked a heart near the boathouse, and then it was smeared away. At the funeral, the priest said words about fate and the cruelty of random things. I went to the bridge at night after the funeral, because that's what people do when grief becomes an instruction manual. There was a fresh photograph on the scene where I had first placed my photograph months before. It was a photograph of Emily, one I recognized from a party where she had worn a yellow dress, but her face had been carefully, deliberately removed with that same blunt tool. It was worse than the missing photo before, because this one had had life and laughter, and then it had been erased. The city had done a justice I could not accept. The photograph was placed there like an accusation. I understood then with a sort of slow horror that loosens your knees. He was not just placing things. He was choosing spaces where people left themselves vulnerable. People will tell you that monsters have lairs. Sometimes they do. But sometimes monsters prefer transit. They live in the spaces between things, the cracks and seams where the city forgets to look. You can't necessarily storm a lair. You have to change the path. I decided to go back to how it began. The routine. I laced my shoes as though I was preparing for a chess endgame. I padded out in the hour where the city holds its breath. I took no phone. I left all talismans at home. I wanted to feel the risk in my hands like a physical object. At the river bend, he stood as usual, face in shadow. He looked up as I approached and then smiled like an old acquaintance. I could feel the air tighten around him. He had something in his hand, a wrapped bundle. It might have been a photograph, a toy, something indescribable. He placed it on the seam of the bridge like a man setting down a tiny altar. You do this because you think it is mercy, I said. He cocked his head, genuinely interested. Mercy, he echoed. Yes, mercy. He made a small sound that could have been a laugh or a sigh. You think my work is mercy? He asked. People forget. They make mistakes. I fix it. Fix it by taking them. The word was a rock dropped into the river, and I felt the splash. He looked at me for a long moment, and then calmly, as if reciting a final instruction, he said, "People replace what they cannot hold. They make space for what matters. If someone must be thin for others to hold space, they become thin. The city always asks a price." There was no lightning. There was no theatrical event. The man folded his hands and waited like a teacher. I think at some point you realize the world doesn't operate on climaxes. It operates on small, steady cruelty, on schedules and habits. He reached into his jacket and produced a tiny photograph peeking from the cloth. He offered it like a man offer you the truth of a coin. "Would you like to place it?" he asked. I looked at the photograph. It was a child's face, the mouth open in a laugh. I thought of Emily's photograph, the missing face. I thought of the cassette and the cart. I thought of every small thing misplaced on our path. I felt a pressure to choose. I closed my fist around the photograph. I dropped it into the river instead. It made no sound that I could hear. The current took it, and a soft eddy replaced the place it had been. The man watched the photograph disappear, and the smallest part of the smile on his face shifted, like a clock hand twitching. "You can't make them belong by throwing them away," he said finally. "No," I answered, "but I can refuse to be the one to place them." His eyes widened for just an instant, as if there had been a possibility he had not calculated. Then he laughed softly, a sound like thin ice cracking. "Refusal is a kind of choice," he said. "It will not always be enough." I don't know if what I did changed anything. People still left photographs and gloves near the bridge from time to time. The man was seen less often, but sightings continued on nights when the lamps stuttered like tired fireflies. Sometimes a pedestrian would find a small object placed gently by the railing, a coin, a toy, and for a day they felt less alone. Other times whole families felt the nameless absence of someone who had gone out and never returned. Some nights I still walked the path, because the city has a way of demanding that you live with the small, unanswerable things. There are quiet hours when I think I see him in a doorway across the river, a dark shape that isn't quite a person. I never spoke to him again. I suppose that decision, my refusal, was my own small statement. It felt like honesty. People will tell you the practical steps. Report, get security, move, call the police. Do them. They are not misplaced. But also remember this. A city can collect a story and hold it like a lantern. The story will glow depending on how many people choose to look at it. If we stop looking, it disappears. If we look too closely, sometimes it bakes and hardens into something we cannot easily change. The worst thing about my story is not the man with the cart. It's the way ordinary knights learned a new grammar, a grammar that asks you to place things, or watch them be placed, or refuse to place them at all. So if you walk by a river alone at night, and you come to the place where the light thins and the lamps will get their numbers, don't be tempted to collect what's been left. Don't place anything unless your hands know the difference between mercy and substitution. Walk across and never look back. But if you must look back, if your curiosity is the sort that tugs at the hem of your resolve, do it at a distance and with your fingers around your coat, like a person who has learned that sometimes the city will whisper your name and mean more than it says. Story 6. I don't think I'll go camping again. I was that kid in the back of the room, the one that was quiet, hated cameras, always there, but never really seen. I preferred it that way, until I met Xavier. I won't use his real name, but say my friend, or something similar is unusual to me. Xavier and I weren't fast friends. We were instant friends. I was sat in our school library, reading through. I think it was turning the screw that day. And he saw me, and next thing I knew, I had a reading buddy. He didn't like my taste in books much, and I didn't like his, but we still suggested books to each other. I've found a love for a few new books and series thanks to him. He still doesn't like my psychological horrors and thrillers, but he has tried to read a few. Anyway, I'm rambling. My apologies, I'm sleep deprived. I haven't really slept since this whole thing, and I remember a little while ago my therapist telling me that writing things down and telling people might help. So I'm here. I hope this helps. Now, Xavier and I had decided to end our school days with a camping trip. I've just finished school and he dropped out a year or so ago. But we decided to grab clothes and visit this volcano an hour or so from my house. It was a popular tourist location until a few years ago and a family went missing. Ghost stories aplenty appeared after that. It's the culture here. Agree and add details when someone not from around here tells you they heard something from someone or other. But we decided to go would be empty and quiet. We were nearing winter, and it got cold here, though there was never any snow. By the time we got to the campground, I was starting to feel that dizzy, lightheaded feeling I got when something finally settled in. There were no lights. We appeared to be completely alone, and it was a running joke. But I'm terrified of the dark and the silence. We'd set everything up, and I needed to walk. My leg ached from the walking brace was digging in. I remember standing at the edge of the clearing, and just looking up, not straight up, but from where I was standing it felt like I was looking straight ahead, an illusion from the way the trees grew compared to the ground. It made me feel dizzy and a wave of vertigo nearly knocking me over, and I decided to take a picture, and not do that again. I remember how quiet it felt. It was too quiet, like there was nothing around. And maybe some people found that peaceful. I didn't. I hated when nothing was making noise. I needed noise, not white noise, but people's songs, something synthetic. It made me feel safe. I hadn't thought to grab a speaker in our haste. Come on, mate, quit fretting. I remember muttering something obscene at him, though I doubt he heard what, and I don't remember. I never had the best memory. Rude. He'd laughed. A stone hit in my hand. We have a bucket of water to put the fire out. Just sit down and relax. He grabbed me and practically forced me into the camp chair. It's not that I didn't believe him. I just struggled to just stop and exist. And when I found a stick shoved in my hands and a pack of jumbo marshmallows on my lap, I scoffed, roasting one over the open fire. I don't remember much of that night, or the following day. I just remember a couple of cops driving down. They said something about just checking in because the smoke had been spotted earlier, and a warning about being careful not to wander too far, so we didn't get lost. They were nice. I think I remember that. But everything is fuzzy and kind of hazy. By the second night, I'd gotten over the immediate nerves of being in the dark and the night silence, so I was less restless. We were laughing and joking, telling scary stories that got my skin crawling. It's kind of ironic that I was the one that got scared by ghost stories, and yet I loved them. Xavier got scared too, but he didn't enjoy horror like I did. But the fire was nice. The food was unhealthy, and I felt at peace with Xavier. We were in the tent, a fabric one from my reenactment days. We ended up in the same sleeping bag as the chill came in. This is the only part one remember perfectly clearly of the whole trip. That night, I kept waking up. The first time was just before midnight. I only knew that from the alarm clock radio Xavier had allowed me to bring. It wasn't that good of an alarm clock or a radio, and the only reason he allowed me to bring it on our technology-free trip. It told the temperature as well as the date and time. The main reason I wanted it was because it produced a good amount of light, and I wasn't stuck in complete darkness with a breathing person. By the 10th time I woke up without really knowing why, I decided it had to be because I needed to pee. It wasn't uncommon to keep waking up when I had to go, so I carefully pushed Xavier off of me, much to his dream-addled annoyance at the way he protested slightly. Sat there in the tent fighting with the closing strap. I remember the pain that was dealing with the weird loop system the Vikings of tent had been based on used. Top strap went through the top loop on the body of the tent, then threaded into the next one before the strap was looped through them both and all the way down. By the time I'd gotten the bottom 5, undone the need to pee had taken root. I slipped out of the decently lit confines, and as I sat there looking at the dark clearing, I felt that dread pooling in my stomach at the thought of being out in the dark. It was irrational, but for a moment I contemplated waking Xavier and begging him to come with me. But I forced the feeling down. My inability to deal with my fear of the dark was an excuse to wake Xavier. So I grabbed the stick we'd been using to roast marshmallows and used it to pull myself upright. In that moment, as I shuffled across the campsite to the tree line, I remembered how much I took having 2 fully functional legs to walk. I had to keep my head down so I could make sure I didn't step funny on the ground. The only thing worse than shuffling through a dark space on one leg and a stick was tripping and screwing my other leg up and being stranded there. For a moment, I wondered what I would do. If I would just stay still and panic, or would I instinctively try to get back to tent? Or, more likely, I would just have a complete panic attack and freak hour until Xavier came out to calm me. I had reached the tree line by the time I had focused back on my task. I didn't trust my leg to stay stable while I urinated if I looked up at the dizzying trees. Then I heard the rustle of the tent flap as it was forced open. I nearly called out to greet Xavier, but the fear that there was something out there that would hear me kept the words caught in my throat. Though, after a long moment with no sound of footsteps in the dead leaves, I came to the conclusion that Xavier had awoken and noticed I was gone and poked his head out to check on me, and I felt safer. As I finished, I had moved the stick and turned. A flicker of confusion burst in my chest at the large shadow in the tent. But it had to be Xavier moving around. I reasoned. It made sense as I shuffled closer, until I noticed a mass that would have to be on the air mattress. A body-shaped shadow. And I remember the sheer terror in my chest as I screamed, realizing there was someone in there with Xavier. Whoever was seemed to startle and knock the clock over, and I lost sight of the shadows. I managed around the tent and yanked it open, ready to use the stick to attack the person when Xavier right in the light. And then I saw he was the only one in there and spun, half expecting to see the person behind me. But all I saw was the smoldering embers of the coals in the fire pit disappear and reappear. Xavier had gently grabbed my arm, murmuring something that was probably supposed to be comforting or maybe coaxing. But over the roar of adrenaline and my racing heartbeat, he might as well have been signing at me. I stood there, just watching the clearing for a long few moments before Xavier managed to coax me into the tent. He gently forced me to the mattress as he grabbed a torch and looked around outside before redoing the straps, repeatedly asking me what was wrong. The flap was firmly closed before he turned to face me properly, asking me again what happened. But the words caught in my throat as I fought down the gasping breaths. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. Every little noise caused me to flinch and fear rushed through my body. My hands stayed clenched around Xavier's all night as I sat vigilante. When I had managed to stammer an explanation out, Xavier had tried to reassure me it was just paranoia. But there's something about that sort of terror that made you know there was something to be terrified of. The next day I had been more quiet, unable to stop watching the trees. Xavier had started whistling or humming. To fill the void, he'd explain when I asked why. I started doing it too. It was a balm to my frayed nerves. We'd gone on a walk, ate lunch, and just lay around the fire talking about nothing and everything. But as the night started crawling across the sky, the lump in my stomach appeared, and I felt that growing dread. We stayed up later that night. I don't think Xavier was all that comfortable with me after the night before. It was early morning by the time he decided that we should get some sleep. We curled up, and I was struggling to sleep, still unnerved out of my skin. But I had managed to. The clock had read about 4:19, the last time I checked it before I fell asleep. At least Xavier agreed that something was wrong that morning. Now, I've never been a sleepwalker, maybe a bit of chatterbox, but I never got up and wandered around, not without someone coaxing me about. And after my leg, I was most definitely not going to get up and walk around while I was asleep. Xavier woke me that morning, and the sun was high. It was strange for me to sleep so late, but then again, just over 24 hours awake would take their toll. It was only after I reasoned that I became of the one problem with the light sky. I wasn't in the tent. Don't. I had never heard that tone from Xavier before, and it was then that I came to the sinking realization that he wasn't as loud as he should have been. But there was bark digging in my shoulder, and as the pins and needles spread up my legs, I looked down. I don't like heights. It's not that I'm afraid of them. I'm afraid of not having something solid under my feet. And as I looked down and saw Xavier beneath me, the ground so far, I let out the most pathetic of noises. It took half an hour before I was able to calm myself enough to look around without wanting to vomit. I was perched on a stable and large branch a good 10-15 meters off the ground. So a small part of me felt better knowing that I was only going to fall if I moved. But my leg was cramping as it dangled beneath me, and I knew that if I left it like that, I could screw up the circulation. But I had no idea where my center of balance was. I had no idea how far I could lean or shift without risking falling down. I had decided to just pull and hold my leg up so it was still over the edge of the branch as to not change my balance all that much. Xavier had spent the time trying not only to figure out how I got up there, but how I was supposed to get down. Apparently, he couldn't see how I climbed up. There were no other branches. I was sat on the second lowest, with the next on the other side of the tree not that far beneath me. But it was also a hollow, dead branch that would have shattered under my weight if I had used it. Xavier had found that out when he tried to make a makeshift ladder with it. The rope tied securely, and the moment he tried to pull himself up, it creaked before slamming into the ground. I would be lying if that hadn't got my heart racing again. I just kept wondering how long before the branch I was on broke. Even with Xavier laughing it off and telling me it was hollow and long dead, and I was sat on a healthy branch, I couldn't fight the panic. But I had managed to catch the rope, as Xavier decided to throw it towards me instead. I had managed to tie it there, but no knot would ever be strong enough for me to trust my weight on, even with the much lighter frame I had for my height and age. But Xavier had started to climb up and was about halfway up, and there was no creaking. But he'd gone back down to stretch his hands and rub some of the dirt into his palms for extra grip. Have you ever dislocated your shoulder? It's a searing pain. It feels like you're about to rip your arm off, especially when you're holding onto a rope, swinging around. I don't remember falling. I don't even remember grabbing the rope to stop my plummet to the ground. I just remember the searing pain in my shoulder as I latched onto and was swinging under it. I remember the pain of the rope ripping my skin as I fell to the ground. Xavier had grabbed my legs to stop me falling harshly on them. Xavier had helped me clean my hands. Neither of us talking about the tree. I still don't know what happened to put me up there, and I don't think I wanted. We had debated using the pager the two police had left with us, so we could contact them, asking them to come pick us up or bring us something for my hands and shoulder. But after a search, we could remember where we placed it, so we didn't. It had been relocated. I think I remember sobbing and begging and just not feeling anything until my throat burned with acid. I don't think I did it. Xavier might have. But I can't ask him at the moment. There's a lot I don't know, a lot I want to ask him. Unfortunately, at the moment, Xavier is unable to answer them. No one can, but that's not important at the moment. I remember being curled up at Xavier's feet, like a dog most people said when they saw me do it. His hand was in my hair as we both just stayed silent, watching the crackling fire. We cooked kangaroo, I believe. I just remember struggling to chew it. both because my jaw felt like it was glued, and my throat burned, and my stomach refused to settle. Xavier had practically forced a diced tomato into me, murmuring about how I had to eat something or I would make myself sicker. That night neither of us were able to sleep, my body burned, and Xavier seemed scared that I would wander off again. I had tried to talk about some of the things I had learned in my classes, but after a few tries, we kept returning to the last November, and the conversation stilted uncomfortably. Had we fallen asleep, we would have missed the faint noise of dry leaves shifting around, footsteps that seemed to echo louder, circling the tent. Xavier had glanced at the clock that left everything inside faintly visible. I had understood his silent question, and despite my nerves, the terror that gripped me at the thought of not knowing what was there, I went and grabbed the clock before deciding that I would just knock the crate over and make sure it landed face down. We were in darkness, and I forced my breathing to stay slow as the footsteps seemed to stay closer. I pictured the tent being pressed on, as if someone was running their hand along it. Xavier hadn't been drowned in terror, and had grabbed a stick that I'd been using as a makeshift walking stick when we weren't roasting marshmallows, and he'd carefully undid one side of flap. I wanted to stop him, but I remained frozen, eyes locked to the small black gap. I could still see the coals, and the moon was full, so it wasn't that dark. But as the footsteps rounded the corner, I waited and watched. For a moment, I thought of a person appearing, but no one did. It was as if they vanished the moment they got to the gap, but I could still hear them. Could hear their breaths as they should have stood just outside the gap. Xavier seemed to have the same thought as he suddenly stabbed the stick out. There was no noise, no nothing. It just went through empty space. I might not have the best memory, but I know that for a second it seemed to get caught before it kept going. It looked as if something had been hit, but vanished immediately afterwards, and the stick kept going. He pulled it back in, and after a second, he grabbed the clock and pointed out. I never really understood why Xavier had always gotten frustrated when he came over and stayed the night in my room, complaining about my alarm clock, but seeing its pathetically small face light up all the clearing in its path, I realized just how bright it was. There was nothing, and as Xavier stepped out, I had pressed a knife into his hand. The largest one I could find that wasn't the butcher's knife I had brought for preparing meat. That one I kept hold of as I took the stick and pulled myself to my feet to follow Xavier. We looked around. Nothing seemed out of place, but my leg felt awkward, so I looked down and tried to make sure it was twisted or twisted funny. It had fallen on me, so it wouldn't have been strange to see that I had accidentally stood on the outside of my foot instead of the bottom. But it wasn't my foot that caught my attention. It wasn't the weird ache that made my hand clench on Xavier's elbow. I had stepped on an uneven spot in the ground, half my foot on the flat ground and the other in the dip. But it wasn't a dip or a rock. We'd chosen this spot because there was perfectly flat ground leading to the fire, and as Xavier tilted the clock down, we became aware that it was a footprint. Deep, large footprints that seemed to circle our tent and vanish. Xavier had grabbed me and dragged me back into the tent. It jarred my leg. The next thing I remember was Xavier forcing water down my throat. He'd pushed our ice cooler in front of the entrance flap, and the clock was carefully suspended above us. It means we can't see without giving our locations away. Xavier explained that, I'm sure my confused look, just drink, you passed out. I'm not sure if it was shock or your leg, but you need to drink, Xavier continued, helping me sit up. That night was a rush of silent and careful packing. Xavier agreed that we wouldn't be staying the rest of this planned trip. We had waited for the sun to properly rise before I focused on drenching the coals from our fire and cleaning up all our cooking stuff. We'd been good about using our rubbish box, so that wasn't a problem. But as I found myself studying the prints in the ground, they seemed to be wrong. They were too long for feet, too thin for a person that had to be either really tall or had unusually big feet. There were some weird points on them too, points that seemed familiar, and yet I couldn't place them. It wasn't even noon before we were driving out. The trees following our ascent up the large hill that used to hold the lava in when the place was an active volcano, which it hadn't been for hundreds of years. But as we rose higher and higher, then down the other side, other than the motion sickness that hit me, like a wave, it seemed like everything was starting to freeze, as if while in the mouth we had felt the heat of lava. I remember grabbing a blanket and wrapping it around my shoulders, Xavier had said it was probably just a motion sickness, but my fingers had been blue, or at least they looked like they had tinged blue. But by the time I had managed to stutter out a plea for Xavier to look through chattering teeth, they had gone back to normal. They ached when I flexed them, but they were fine. I didn't feel fine. Xavier handed me a hot pocket, told me to just hold on to it. Your hands are scraped raw. It's probably just that, Xavier had said, though there was something about the way his voice shifted that told me he didn't completely believe his own words. Once we got a good bit away from the campground, we pulled over and tried to come up with a plan. I couldn't focus on anything but that ache in my body. I could go for some chocolate, a hot chocolate. I said pathetically I wasn't even sure why, but I did remember that there was this place nearby that made some of the best chocolate and hot chocolates I had ever had. They'll probably have self-service too, Xavier agreed, but he didn't immediately begin to drive again. Instead, he was watching me, and when I glanced at him, he glanced down at my leg. It took a second before remembering the brace I was still wearing, and after a short fight with it, we began driving. I don't remember the drive or ordering my hot chocolate. I just remember sitting at one of the benches at the tables placed around the eating area. I didn't really drink my hot chocolate. I just held the warm cup and let it soothe my hands as Xavier ignored his own drink to frantically search for something online. Then we were on the road again, going somewhere I couldn't remember being the name of, if I had even been told or decided together. I just watched the trees pass as we drove, flexing my legs and hands as I focused on keeping true feeling in them. But as we drove, the sun dipping beneath the horizon, the dread of night started coming back, and as the ute started going faster, hitting the speed limit and surely passing it, I knew Xavier was just as uncomfortable. I had started looking for hotels or motels near us, but in the middle of nowhere, with only the occasional building of the vast, tiny town we drove through, there was nowhere. Just keep driving. I'll take a nap and we'll swap, I had suggested, and Xavier didn't argue. It was all the more obvious Xavier was uncomfortable with the thought of stopping. I'm not sure when Xavier had started shoving me until I woke up. I had prepared to swap with him, only to notice the sun started to rise as the sky turned a deep orange. I was surprised and maybe a little annoyed that Xavier had forced himself to drive through the night. It was dangerous and idiotic, and I had told him so. But we swapped places, and he was out quickly in the passenger seat. I'm not a bad driver, but I'm cautious and scared. And I hate driving. Hate being responsible for a nearly 2.5-ton chunk of pure metal. I also constantly drifted left and right. I could never be too close to the lines. The outer ones gave me the uncontrollable thought that I was going to be jolted to the side and off the road. The inner lines had a similar effect, but there was something infinity more terrifying about swerving into another car. But I kept focusing on the breathing exercises my therapist gave me and just kept driving. After a few long moments, I had the sudden realization. I was driving, and my therapist told me that I had finally faced my problem with cars. When Xavier woke and saw how far I had gotten us, he'd be proud. Or maybe it would be more about how long I could keep driving. In either case, I kept driving. The thought of Xavier waking and seeing how well I'd done fueled me. But the longer I sat there, driving, the more numb my leg became. My hands ached from clenching on the wheel. It wasn't a panic attack. Not quite, but it was close. Or maybe it was because, as my leg grew numb, I stopped being able to properly tell how hard I was pressing the accelerator, pressing harder and harder, so I could feel the pressure. Xavier woke with a start, blinking in surprise as he asked what was wrong. "May, why are we going so fast?" he demanded, grabbing his handle. I ended up slamming on the brakes. The ute lurched forward, and I sucked in a deep breath. "Sorry," I choked out. Xavier had looked at me, a look of pity on his face before he sighed. "It's okay. It's been what?" He looked out the window at the sky. "At least a good few hours. You did really well, mate," he told me, and we'd swap back. It was a few hours later when I came to the realization that it seemed to be unusually empty. We were still surrounded by bush, but after the hours we'd driven, you'd have expected us to have gotten some sort of town or city. "Xavier, did you drive through any towns?" I'd asked, feeling something unnameable clawing at my stomach. "No, I didn't." I had whispered, suddenly unable to think of anything else to say. We were only, what? 2, maybe 3 hours out of generic city name. We both driven a lot more than that. I added. I heard Xavier's knuckles crack. We're not dash he had started, but he didn't get to finish the sentence. There was a screech, and I think we hit something big. I just remember the shadow towering over us as we came to the harsh stop, but my head had slammed forward into my airbag. I'm not sure what happened. I feel like I'm writing that a lot, but admitting to not knowing is supposedly meant to help process. But anyway, I have these small snippets, a burn, an ache, then bless cold. The stench of something within just earth. Then all I could smell was smoke, and I jolted up. I gasped and looked around, watching the flames eat up the leaves on the ground, and I reactively slammed my hand over it, smothering the flames. I pushed myself up, looking around the space. Cold dread filled me as I recognized the camping ground. I looked around and found Xavier not that far from me. His nose appeared to be broken, but he was breathing. I don't remember how I got beside him, or when he woke up, but he winced and grabbed his eye, and when he opened it, I had forced him to close it. There was glass in his eye, and I didn't want him to blind himself. I tore my pant leg and wrapped it around his eye to try and keep it all stable. I remember looking around, noting faintly the amount of feathers everywhere and the strange footsteps again. After a long moment, I grabbed Xavier and helped him to his feet, and we stumbled along. I vaguely remember the road out of grounds, pulling Xavier along it. But as the night closed in, the fog rolled in, and as we neared the top of the hill, it grew so thick I couldn't see my feet. I could barely see Xavier beside me, but I kept a tight grip on him as we moved. It was only after we reached the ridge that I remembered my mother's warning about making sure that if someone had a bleeding head wound, not to move them, keep them sat or laying down. But it was too late for that. As we stumbled along, my foot hit something and I froze. It skirted away, but it was metallic, and I carefully felt for it and used my foot to pull it back. As my hands curled around it, I froze, the button formatting a tiny screen. The pager thing the police gave us. I murmured, bringing it to my face. I fumbled with it. Xavier was the one told how to use. I had been hiding away from them. A mix of social anxiety and a hatred for the way I looked left me uncomfortable, especially with people. But I managed to hit some combination of buttons that turned it on. I struggled to write out help, trying to get my head around using a keypad to make words. I had managed to get it after nearly 6 tries and multiple mistypes. But after I had done it, I had that feeling that we'd stopped along and needed to keep moving. The thing about the outback, there were birds and insects and other creatures day and night. I tuned them out constantly. They were a distraction to what might be sneaking around. But as I stumbled along, the call of birds was deafening loud, like they had lost something and wanted it back. It sounded like it was behind us, coming from the deep hole of the volcano and out. Wings flapped, and I felt a wave of horror. People always said, while in nature, if everything went silent, there was danger. If all the birds suddenly fled, taking flight, there was something big and dangerous coming. I tried to pull Xavier along. I was sure that whatever had circled our tent was what scared them off, but he refused. I saw weird dark shapes above us. They seemed to come down, circle closer, and I watched Xavier look up to, and he clung to me, legs buckling, and I found myself struggling to hold all his weight up. Then red and blue flashes pierced the air. A screech of sirens, and the shapes fled with what could have been terrified squawks. I didn't even think to move away from the middle of the road, and as headlights filled my vision, I couldn't move. A deer in headlights, I thought, a freeze response from heightened anxiety, and finding myself in front of a car again. My therapist had called it. I remember the screech of wheels, but maybe there weren't any. I remember someone blocking out the light, and then grabbing my arm before looking down at Xavier slumped against me. "Come on, mate, let's get you in the car," a woman's voice said, and I felt a hand on my back. I didn't move. I didn't want to let Xavier go, but the other officer picked him up, and as he went to carry him away, I tried to follow, my hands trying to stay attached, but my leg gave out. "Hey, it's okay. You'll be with him," the woman said as she helped me up into the car. I didn't pay attention to getting into the car. I just kept checking that Xavier wasn't hurt. "We need to go," one of them had said, but I couldn't focus on the words. Xavier was looking past me, hand clenched around my own, and as I turned my head, I saw the faint outline of a tree. For a moment I didn't understand. Then the rope tied to its lowest branch and a weird sharp protrusion on the other side of the trunk. Then my eyes landed on the dark shape that seemed to be crouched on the branch just above where I had woken up a couple days ago. By the time we'd gotten to the nearest hospital, Xavier was slurring and murmuring under his breath, something intelligible and drawled into one long sound. My body was on fire, pain shooting through every part of me. A magpie was sat in a tree above us as the police officers helped us in, and for some reason I thought back to the wrong footprints, the 3 weird points. Then I remembered how they sharpened into a point at the back, and it clicked. They looked familiar because I had seen them. They were talon prints, giant talons. I remember freezing on the spot, eyes locked on that magpie as it called out its song, and I was stood back in the fog, listening to the angry birds, and Xavier was frozen beside me. I knew he had realized before I had. He hadn't been afraid of the thing hearing us if we moved. He was afraid the giant birds would have seen us move, the thing in the tree. I was in a medically induced coma for a couple days. It was for my health. When I woke up, I was past a different psychologist, until when it asked about a memory. He'd asked why I didn't shut my eyes to remember better when I told him I couldn't remember. And I remember his face fell as I explained that sort of thing never helped. I was rushed into a lot more tests, and afterwards I had multiple police stood in my room. The 2 that had brought me and Xavier back, and a handful of others, a collection of psychologists, and a doctor who was my primary attendant. The psychologist explained that I appear to have a serious case of aphantasia. That was a couple hours ago, and I can't stop hearing his words, his explanation. My therapist had been told apparently. She didn't believe, even with all the evidence that was apparently given. She said I had seen things that weren't real too much for that. It's terrifying to know that I am unable to voluntarily picture things. I have no visual imagination. That I don't remember my dreams because my brain is unable to latch onto images it creates itself. That most of my memory problems is because I am unable to properly recall visual stimuli. But I think the most terrifying thing is that I still remember most of what happened. I remember the giant bird tracks and the giant bird in the tree. I remember them. And it's terrifying to understand that implication. Now we're all waiting for Xavier to wake and explain what he's sure happened. And I want to know how he figured out the birds before me. Story 7. My sister went missing. A week later, she appeared in my neighbor's window. Hey everyone, the MY name's Greg. I never thought I'd be writing something like this, and you definitely won't believe what I have to say, but I need to tell someone, especially after what happened to my sister when I first moved into the neighborhood. Mr. Pig was already there. He lived alone in the house next to mine. He was old, quiet, and polite in a way that felt rehearsed. He kept to himself, mowed his lawn every Sunday morning, and never left his porch light off, even in the daytime. He had a hobby that everyone in town whispered about when he wasn't around. He collected companion dolls, or so everyone thought. They wouldn't have been cheap ones, either. They looked too real. Skin with pores, eyelashes, freckles, veins under the wrists, everything. He dressed them in sundresses and sweaters, and sat them around his living room like a family frozen mid-conversation. His side of the story was that he restored damaged models for resale. Nobody questioned it, and nobody ever saw him get deliveries of fresh, damaged models. But somehow he always had a rotating menagerie of fresh faces around his living space. People joked about the lonely old man behind his back, but that was it. At night, I'd sometimes hear a low humming sound from his house, like a generator running in the basement, only deeper in pitch. I tried to ignore it. I had no reason to suspect he was anything more than an eccentric collector, hobbyist or repairman, or possibly even just a weird old pervert. That was before my sister disappeared. Her name was Lydia. She lived about 40 miles away, just on the other side of the nearest major city. She worked nights at a diner and was a college student by day. One Thursday, she clocked out from her shift and got in her car, but never made it home. Her car was found by the side of the highway, keys still in the ignition. Her boyfriend called me after the first full day of her being missing, asking if she had come to visit without telling him. I drove straight to her house, then to her local PD. The police were no help. Girls her age run away all the time, trying to find themselves. We're sure she'll show up in a few days, the officer behind the desk told me in a mock comforting tone, and handed me back my filled-out witness statement without even signing it. A week later, a new figure appeared in Mr. Pig's window. The doll's face was obscured by a curtain, but had the same brown hair as Lydia, the same silver bracelet she wore every day, and the same uniform she'd been wearing when she went missing, the company logo emblazoned over one of the chest pockets. Then I blinked, and it was gone. AT first. I thought grief was playing tricks on me. I even laughed at myself a little. I decided I had to see for myself, even if it was only to quell my growing anxiety. The next morning, I built up the courage to walk across my yard, around the fence between our properties, and knock on his door. He answered right away, wearing the same green cardigan he always did, and the same friendly expression. A smell like the combination of formaldehyde and wires burning wafted out his house. "Morning, Gret," he said softly. "Something wrong?" I tried to sound casual, reaching for something to talk about long enough to take a peek through the partially open door. "Those dolls of yours, you ever think about selling them?" He smiled like he was in on a joke I didn't understand, and responded with the same soft voice he answered the door with. "Oh, they're not for sale. Not by me, at least. The creator sends me his defects, and I make them perfect." Over his shoulder, I saw one of the dolls seated in the hallway. There was a thin silver cable running from the collar on the base of its neck down onto the floor, and extending back beyond a bend in the hallway where I could no longer see. He followed my gaze and saw what I was looking at. Then the politeness in his face shifted to suspicion. "Battery charger, Brett. Some of the models are real fancy. Move on their own and everything. Don't look too much into it." He closed the door without another word. That night, the humming was louder than ever. IT wasn't coming to his house this time. It felt like it was underground, like the whole block was vibrating. I waited until after midnight, when I thought he would be sound asleep, and circled to the back of his house. The back door was locked up tight, and all the windows around it had thick curtains blocking my view inside. One of the basement windows was cracked open, though. I climbed through. The smell hit first, antiseptic mixed with melted rubber, and a faint hint of something floral. Rows of dolls sat in the dark, each one connected to a web of cables feeding into a single metal console. Their skin shone faintly under the fluorescent light. This was the closest I had ever been to one of the dolls, and from this distance I could tell that their eyes weren't glass. They were too wet. I stepped closer, glancing up and down the row of dolls, and noticing slight movements in a few of the dolls. Some of them appeared to be breathing, slow, shallow, almost imperceptible. A few had odd twitches in their limbs, as if a muscle was spasming. One blinked at me as my eyes passed over it, and at the end of the row, the doll with Lydia's uniform turned slightly towards me, and I could see the face now. It was her. A single teardrop slid down her cheek, towards the corner of her mouth. "Lydia," I whispered. A faint sound escaped her, like a hum caught between a sob and a sigh. "Beautiful, isn't she?" Mr. Pig was standing behind me. I hadn't heard him come in, and I had no idea how he got that close without me detecting him. He didn't sound angry. He sounded proud, as if he were a farmer showing off his prize-winning livestock. "Don't worry, they're not dead," he said eagerly. "They'll never die, and they'll never look a day older." He chuckled. His facial expression was that of an artist, admiring his craft after a long day's work. They volunteered for a trial of a product guaranteed to make them look young forever. "So you froze them?" I yelled at him, tears of rage filling my eyes and beginning to cloud my vision. He shook his head, an almost sad look on his face. "Freezing? No," he said as if I just insulted his magnum opus. Such a barbaric way to preserve flesh, he said. Then in an instant his face suddenly returned to a grin of pride and glee. I used some equipment borrowed and knowledge gained from a research group I was a part of back in my working days. Penumbra Foundation. You might have heard of them if you've ever studied field harmonics. They pioneered some of the best multifunction sensors to date. He touched one of the silver wires tenderly, as if patting the shoulder of a loved one. The device stabilizes their organic structures and stops the decay process entirely. The only side effect is, well, they can't really move very much in this state. He grimaced a little. That's a pesky little bug that we never really worked out at Penumbra. But it's not the worst thing that could happen, though. I assure you, the ones that were able to move freely after the process weren't quite themselves anymore. He looked at Lydia. She's awake, though. She can't move much, but she can hear you, see you, and feel you. The best part is, she'll never have to worry about getting older. She wanted that. She wanted to stay beautiful forever. I had heard enough. I lunged at him, but he caught my wrist too easily. His speed was remarkable, even for a man in his prime, much less Mr. Pig in his old age. His grip was iron, and there was a faint vibration running through his skin. Now, why would you go and do a thing like that, neighbor? I went and shared something personal with you, and you take a swing at me like I'm a golf ball. The last thing I remember was seeing his balled fist heading towards my face. When I woke up, I was lying on my own couch that NY had ached. I walked to the bathroom and looked in the mirror. A huge bruise covered my left cheek, and both of my eyes were blackened and swollen. I felt like I had been hit by a truck. By the time I stumbled out of my own house, I could see that Mr. Pig's house was surrounded by police cars. I tried to walk over to talk to them, to tell them what I saw, to tell them to save my sister, tell them anything really, but I got turned away before I ever reached the door. Not even a word, just a flick of the officer's wrist. I was too dizzy to fight, and I figured if that many police officers were there, they'd already found her and the others. I went to lie down on my own volition before my body decided to do it for me. By the time I woke up, they were gone. No flashing lights, no police officers, no police tape, even. In their place were vans, black, windowless, all with temporary plates. Men in dark tactical gear jumped out of vans and moved into house in pairs, their faces hidden by black masks. On each of their uniforms glowed a faint white symbol, a triangle inside a circle. They carried silver tools that buzzed softly as they walked. One by one, they wheeled tarp-covered cages and containers out of house. From my window, I watched in silence point one cage shifted as it was wheeled beneath the streetlights. Inside, through the bars, I saw my sister. Her eyes were open. She was visibly breathing and had a manic grin spread across her face. Her hands gripped the bars, which were bending outward slightly. I immediately ran downstairs and out the front door, ready to bolt to my sister's aid. But one of the men noticed me and stopped me before I could reach the cage. "That's your sister, isn't it? Lydia? She's still in there somewhere," he said quietly. "We might be able to bring her back, since she hasn't been like this for very long. This isn't the first time we've dealt with this." He told me, with sincere compassion in his voice, "You're the one who tipped off our informant at the PD. By the way, this wouldn't have been possible without you. Sorry about the way he acted towards you, but we can't have things like this on the public record. We'll be in contact if we have any luck." He turned to walk away, but looked back at me, his face contorted into something like fear. "If you see her again and she isn't being escorted to your front door by us, do not let her in." He handed me a card, smooth, matte black, warm to the touch. No name, no number, just the same symbol that rested above the left breast pocket on his tactical gear. When I held it tightly, I could feel a faint pulse like a heartbeat. "Keep this card on you at all times. If she does come back for you, she won't be able to touch you as long as you have it." Then he walked away. The vans finished loading and left shortly after. By morning, Mr. Pig's house was gone, not demolished. Gone. The lot was leveled, and the grass that grew over it matched the surrounding lots, without a single indication of fresh sod being laid. No mention of the property showed up online, and nothing about it being removed was in the newspapers or on TV. Nobody mentioned Mr. Pig. Nobody mentioned the dolls. Nobody mentioned Lydia, not even her boyfriend, who has refused to talk to me ever since what happened. Last night, I heard a tapping on my bedroom window. Soft, slow, 3 taps. Pause, 3 again. I looked up in the reflection. I saw her, Lydia. A smile spread across her face. Hand raised mid-wave. I grabbed the card the man had given me and gripped it tight. The light in my bedroom went out, and I heard a shriek from the window as the glass exploded inward. My bedroom is on the 2nd floor, and I have no balcony. Story 8. She still sits on her side of the bed. Voicemail saved 6 months ago. Hey, Han. I just got off work. Traffic's kind of bad on the interstate, but I should be home by 7. Do you want me to grab Chinese? Or that soup you like on Willow? Anyway, call me if you think of anything. Love you. That's the last thing I ever heard from her. I've listened to that message so many times I can tell where the static starts to fade behind her voice. I know the tiny hitch in her laugh when she says soup. The police told me she probably hit the bridge embankment before she ever realized the car was skidding. They said it like mercy. But I still see the headlights folding in on themselves every time I close my eyes. The phone sits on her nightstand. Screen cracked, battery long dead. I can't bring myself to delete the message. I've stopped charging it, though the light that used to blink when it was plugged in, blue, steady, patient. Started to feel like something watching. I still sleep on my side of the bed. Her pillow hasn't moved. There's a faint impression where her head used to rest. I straighten it every morning so it doesn't disappear. The closet still smells like her shampoo. Every few weeks I open it and stand there until the scent fades, then close the door before it can all drift away. Most nights, I talk to the mirror across from bed. I don't remember why I set it there. Maybe I like seeing the window reflected behind us, the illusion of space. Lately, I keep it because it feels like the only thing listening. Sometimes I can almost imagine she's sitting beside me, just out of view, on her side, facing the wall. It's easier to speak when I can pretend she's hearing me. Work hasn't changed. I manage a small, 2-screen movie theater downtown. The owner barely shows up anymore, so I run the place by routine. I sit in the projection booth, watch the same reels loop over and over. There's a comfort in it. Stories that end the same way every time. People who stay alive as long as the light keeps moving through them. My sister drops by once a week. She brings groceries, talks about the neighbors, asks if I've thought about selling the house. I tell her I'm fine. I think she knows I'm lying, but she still smiles and straightens the picture frames before she leaves. The last time she came, she touched the bedspread and said softly, "It still smells like her." Then she looked at me, waiting for an answer I didn't have. The nights are the hardest. I can hear the pipes breathing under the floorboards, the wind moving through the siding. I keep the lights low. Brightness feels wrong now. I sit in bed, look at the mirror, and talk until my voice runs out. It's not prayer, more like rehearsal. Last week, something changed. I was halfway through telling her about the new kid working concessions, a teenager who doesn't understand how to tear tickets straight. And I saw a shift in the mirror. Not movement exactly, but a thickening of the shadow near her side of the bed. It was late, and the lamp was dim, so I thought my eyes were playing tricks. But when I leaned forward, the shadow leaned too, just a fraction of a second behind. I didn't sleep that night. The next evening, I left the lamp on and sat there again, watching. Around 2 a.m., the air turned colder. I could see my breath. The shape was there, faint, like someone sitting perfectly still with their back to me. I spoke her name. The shadow trembled once, then settled. I know how it sounds. Grief makes ghosts of anything that will hold still long enough. But I swear I saw the curve of her shoulder, the dip in the mattress reflected in the glass. I told myself it was memory, habit, something in my brain filling the void. That should have been enough. I didn't touch the mirror for a few days after that first night. I tried to treat it like a hallucination, like something my brain invented because it needed a body to talk to. I worked longer shifts at the theater, sat in the booth with the projectors running, the soundtracks washing over me. The repetition used to soothe me. Real changes, countdowns, the hum of the bulb, but now the gaps between films felt like falling through open space. Customers stopped coming in during the week. I'd turn the volume low and let the light from the screen flicker over the seats, pretending she was sitting somewhere in the dark, watching with me. Once, during a late showing, I swore I saw a head turn in the reflection of the glass between the booth and auditorium. Familiar hair, familiar slope of the shoulders, but when I looked straight out, the row was empty. My sister, Helen, called that weekend. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail saying she was worried that people at work had told her I'd been leaving early, forgetting schedules. She asked if I was seeing someone, the way people mean a professional. The question made me laugh. The sound that came out of me didn't sound like a laugh. That night, I went back to the mirror. The air in the room felt heavy, the kind of pressure that builds before rain. I sat on the edge of the bed and spoke softly, like I was afraid of waking someone. "I've been trying," I said. "I really am. But everything feels quieter without you." In the reflection, the shadow pulsed once, the way light shifts behind a moving curtain. Over the next week, I started timing my evenings around it. I'd come home from the theater, shower, sit on my side of the bed. I'd talk about customers, about movies, about nothing at all. It didn't matter what I said. What mattered was that I filled the silence. The reflection was always the same, her shape facing the far wall, unmoving. Still, I knew when it was listening. The air changed, and the ache in my chest loosened, just for a moment. Helen came over unannounced one night. I hadn't cleaned. She stood in the doorway, looking at the drawn curtains, the half-eaten takeout on the counter. "You're scaring me, Tom," she said. I told her I was fine, just tired from work. "You need sunlight," she said. "You need to see people." I almost said, "I see her every night," but stopped myself. Instead, I promised to visit next week. We both knew I wouldn't. After she left, I found the mirror fogged, as if someone had breathed against it. The temperature was normal, no steam, no open windows. I wiped the glass and for the briefest instant felt warmth under my palm, like skin. The following days blurred. At work, I sat through films I couldn't remember loading. People spoke to me, and I nodded without hearing. My boss called once to ask about payroll, and I realized I hadn't filed it in 2 weeks. The mirror waited for me each night, like a confession booth. By the end of that month, the outline in the reflection was clearer. I could see the fabric of her nightgown, the way her hair fell over one shoulder. She still faced away, head bowed slightly as though listening. I started whispering apologies, things I'd said in anger, promises I'd broken. Each time I spoke, I swore I heard the faintest sigh in return. Then, one evening, she moved, only a little. The mirror caught the tilt of her head, a subtle shift as though she were about to turn. I froze, breath held, waiting, but she stayed like that, half-turned, silent. I sat awake until dawn, eyes burning, afraid to blink. When Helen visited again, I didn't answer the door. She knocked until her voice cracked, then left a note. I watched her drive away from the window and felt nothing except the weight of needing to get back upstairs, to check if the reflection was still there. It was. That night, I dragged the lamp close to the mirror. The light should have broken the illusion, revealed nothing more than glass and my own hollowed face. Instead, it showed more detail. The pale line of her neck, the edge of her hand resting on her lap. My throat closed. I whispered her name, and I swear the corners of the reflection trembled, as though the whole surface were exhaling. I didn't go to work the next day. I sat on the bed until sunrise, talking, waiting. The next few weeks lost their edges. I'd wake in the morning with the lamp still burning, clothes still on, the taste of dust thick in my mouth. Sometimes I would remember talking for hours, sometimes not a word. The mirror always held her motionless, as though time on that side moved slower. Work began to slide away from me. The popcorn machine broke, and I never fixed it. A shipment of soda syrup sat in the stockroom until it went bad. I'd open the theater doors, start a movie, and drift upstairs to the booth where projectors hummed like something breathing. The light washed over the glass, the same endless flicker. Watching it felt safer than stepping outside. One afternoon, the assistant manager, Caleb, found me sitting in the back row long after the film had ended. He said my name twice before I heard him. "You okay, man?" I told him I was fine, just tired. He frowned and pointed at the screen. My own reflection stared back from the black surface, a faint outline behind it, as if another figure sat 2 seats over, just out of projector's range. I blinked and it was gone. That night, I came home to find the bedroom colder than before. The mirror's surface looked wet, like condensation forming from inside. I spoke her name. The air in my throat felt heavy. The outline in the glass was clearer than ever. I could see the folds of her nightgown, the exact tilt of her head. "You don't have to hide," I whispered. "You can look at me." The reflection didn't move, but I felt pressure in my ears, faint and constant, like the air itself had thickened. By morning, the ringing hadn't faded. At work, every sound seemed muffled under it. The chatter of customers, the hum of projector. I turned the volume up on the films until the dialogue warped into static. Helen called again. "Tom, please," she said. "Mom's asking about you. I can come by this weekend." "Don't," I said too quickly. She was quiet a long time. "You're obsessing over her again, aren't you?" The line crackled. I almost asked what she meant, but she hung up before I could. That night, I sat before the mirror longer than ever. The shape on the bed seemed closer, almost brushing the edge of my pillow. When I blinked, I thought I saw her fingers flex. The sound in my ears deepened to a low, thrumming pulse. I pressed my palms against my head, whispered that I missed her, that I'd do anything for another day, another look. The reflection shimmered once, like heat over pavement. Then everything stilled. I could swear I smelled her perfume again, faint but unmistakable. I didn't go to work for 3 days. Caleb left messages asking if I was sick. Helen knocked on the door and shouted my name. I stayed upstairs, lights off, curtains drawn. I ate cereal straight from the box and watched the mirror instead of movies. By the 4th night, the reflection began to blur at the edges. I leaned close enough that my breath fogged the glass. Beneath the fog, I saw her hand move, a slow, uncertain motion, palm opening as if reaching toward me. I raised my own. When my fingertips met the surface, a sharp pressure filled my ears, a whistle that climbed until the world narrowed to pain. I jerked back. The mirror trembled on its stand, but didn't fall. My reflection looked pale and bloodless. A thin trickle ran from my left ear down my neck. I told myself I must have burst a vessel. I cleaned the blood with shaking hands, afraid to look back at the glass. When I finally did, the shape had returned to its stillness. Her head bowed, hair spilling over her shoulder. Waiting. I whispered, "I'm sorry," and the ringing softened to a hum, almost musical. Days bled together. The theater stopped calling. Helen left a note at the door I never opened. I lived by the mirror's clock now. The slow shift of light across her unmoving figure. My own reflection had grown unfamiliar. Pale and stretched, the eyes ringed in gray. Sometimes, if I looked long enough, I'd see her head tilt slightly, like she was listening. I began speaking to her in whispers. Whole conversations whispered through the dark. I told her what the morning smelled like, how I hadn't mowed the lawn, how her clothes still hung in the closet, untouched. I told her that I knew she was real, that death couldn't have stolen everything. Each time, the air thickened, pressing against my ears until it felt like the house itself was leaning closer to listen. One night, I dreamed of her voicemail again, the one she left while driving home that last day. I could hear the sound of the turn signal, the faint hum of the radio, and her voice saying she'd be home soon. But this time, as the words faded, the ringing began, louder than before, filling the space where her voice should have been. I woke with blood on my pillow and my hearing dulled to a steady, humming silence. When I looked toward the mirror, she was standing now, not seated, not bowed, standing, Her back still to me, facing the far corner of the room. The shape of her shoulders was wrong. Too narrow, too sharp, but the nightgown hung just the same. I felt something inside me break open, a terrible mix of joy and fear. I whispered her name. My voice sounded like it came from underwater. She didn't move. I took a step closer, then another. My reflection followed, faint and trembling, eyes wide. The air trembled around me, a low vibration in my skull. "Please," I said, "please, just turn around." Her head twitched, slowly, mechanically. The surface of the glass rippled like water struck by wind. My vision blurred. I reached for the frame to steady myself, and the moment my fingers touched it, the sound hit me, an impossible, screaming frequency that pierced straight through the world. My knees gave out. Blood poured hot and thin from both ears. The mirror flashed white for 30 minutes. Though it could have been longer, I saw nothing. Just light. My eyes burned as if they were full of glass. I remember crawling backward, clutching at the carpet, trying to breathe. The hum filled everything, and beneath it, her voice, soft, rhythmic, whispered my name the way she used when I woke from bad dreams. I wanted to answer. God help me, I wanted to. But every time I opened my mouth, the light grew brighter, and the whisper turned into something else. When sight returned, the mirror was empty. My reflection stared back, pale and hollow. The other side of the bed was made, untouched. The house was silent, except for the faint drip of blood from my chin. I haven't gone to work since. I haven't left this room. The mirror sits across from me, dark now, and I can feel it pulsing in the dark like a heartbeat. Sometimes, just before sleep, I hear the faintest breath behind the glass. Sometimes I see motion in the corner of my eye. I tell myself it's just the dark, but I know better. I think she's waiting for me to turn it around. The face, whatever it is, wasn't supposed to be seen, and it's angry that I didn't look long enough. I can hear it humming again, low and steady. It's in the walls now and the floorboards. I've tried everything, covering the mirror, smashing it, even moving it downstairs. Every time I wake, it's back in its place at the foot of the bed, facing me. I can't sleep without hearing her voice. It sounds so small now, so sad. I know this isn't really a place to ask for help, but I don't know where else to go. I can't call Helen. I can't leave this room. I just need someone, anyone, to tell me what to do before the night ends, because I can feel it getting closer again. The air is heavier. The hum won't stop. And I know, God, I know, before the night is over, I'm going to turn the mirror around. Please, if anyone's reading this, please tell me what to do. Story 9. I run a disposal service for cursed objects. Flanked on either side by palace guards in their filigree blue uniforms, the painter looked austere in comparison. Together they lead him through a hallway as tall as it was wide, with walls encumbered with paintings and tapestries, taxidermy and trinkets. It was an impressive showpiece of the queen's power, of her success, and of her wealth. When they arrived at the chamber where he was to be received, he was directed in by a page who slid open the heavy, ornate doors with practiced difficulty. Inside was more art instruments and flowers across every span of the site. It was an assault of colors, and sat amongst them was an aging woman on a delicately couch, sat sideways with her legs together, a look on her face that was serious and yet calm. "Your Majesty," the painter. The page spoke, his eyes cast down to avoid her gaze. He bowed deeply, the painter joining him in the motion. "Your Majesty," the painter repeated, as the page slid back out of the room. Behind him, the door sealed with an echoing thump. "Come." She spoke after a moment. Gently, he obeyed. Besides a jacquard couch upon which he sat was the artwork he had produced, displayed on an easel but yet covered by a silk cloth. "Painter, I am to understand that your work has come to fruition." Her voice was breathy and paced leisurely. carefully enunciating each syllable with calculated precision. Yes, Your Majesty. I hope it will be to your satisfaction. Very good. Then let us witness this painting. This work that truly portrays my beauty. The painter moved his hand to a corner of the silk on the back of the canvas, and with a brisk tug, exposed the result of his efforts for the queen to witness. His pale eyes fixed helplessly on her reflection as he attempted to read her thoughts through the subtle shifts in her face. He watched as her eyes flicked up and down, left and right, drinking in the subtleties of the shadows, the boldness of color that he'd used, the intricate foreshortening to produce a great depth to his work. He had been certain that she'd approve, and yet her face gave no likeness to his belief. Painter. Her body and head remained still, but finally her eyes slid over to meet his. Yes, Your Majesty, I requested of you to create a piece of work that portrayed my beauty in its truth. For this, I offered a vast wealth. This is correct, Your Majesty. This is not my beauty. My form, my shape, yes, but I am no fool. As she spoke, his world paled around him, backing off into a dreamlike haze as her face became the sole thing in focus. His heart beat faster, deeper, threatening to burst from his chest. Her head raised slightly, her eyes gazing down on him in disappointment beneath furrowed brow. You will do it once more and again if needs be. But know this, painter, until you grant me what you have agreed to, no food shall pass thine lips. Panic set in. His hand began to shake and his mind raced. Your Majesty, I can alter what you'd like me to change, but please, I require guidance on what you will find satisfactory. Page, she called, facing the door for a moment before casting her gaze on the frantic man before her. She spoke to him no more after that. In his dank cell he toiled day after day, churning out masterpieces of all sizes, of differing styles in an attempt to please his liege, but none would set him free. His body gradually wasted away to an emaciated pile of bones and dusty flesh, now drowned by a sullied attire that had once fit so well. At the news of his death, the queen herself came by to survey the scene, her nose turning up at the saccharine stench of what remained of his decaying flesh. He had left one last painting facing the wall, the brush still clutched between gaunt fingers spattered with color, eager to know if he finally had fulfilled her request. She carefully turned it around to find a painting that didn't depict her at all. It was instead a dark image, different in style than the others he had produced. It was far rougher, produced hastily, frantically from dying hands. The painter had created a portrait of himself cast against a black background. His frail, skeletal figure was hunched over on his knees, the red and naked figure of a flayed human torso before him. His fingers clutched around a chunk of flesh ripped straight from the body, holding it to his widened maw while scarlet blood dribbled across his chin and into his beard. She looked on in horror, unable to take her gaze away from the painting. As horrifying as the scene was, there was something that unsettled her even more about the painter's face. Mouth wide as he consumed human flesh was a look of profound madness. His eyes shone brightly against the dark background, piercing the gaze of the viewer and going deeper, right down to the soul. In them he poured the most detail and attention, and even though he could not truly portray her beauty, he had truly portrayed his desperation, his solitude, and his fear. She would go on to become the first victim of the portrait of a starving man. I checked the address to make sure I had the right place before I stepped out of my car into the orange glow of the sunrise. An impressive place it was, with black-coated timber contrasting against white wattle and daub walls on the upper levels which sat atop a rich, ornate brick base strewn with arches and decorative ridges that spanned its diameter. I knew my client was wealthy, but from their carefully curated gardens and fountains on the grounds, they were more well-off than I had assumed. I climbed the steps to their front door to announce my arrival, but before I had chanced the entry opened to reveal the bony frame of a middle-aged man with tufts of white hair sprouting from the sides of his head. He hadn't had a chance to get properly dressed, still clad in his pajamas and a dark cashmere robe, but ushered me in hastily. I'd ordinarily offer you a cup of tea or some breakfast. You'll have to forgive me. Oh, and do ignore the mess. It's been hard to get anything done in this state. He sounded concerned. In my line of work, that wasn't uncommon. Normal people weren't used to dealing with things outside of what they considered ordinary. What he had for me was a great find, something I'd heard about in my studies, but never thought I'd have a chance to see in person. I'm actually quite excited to see it. I'm sorry I'm so early. I chirped. Perhaps my excitement was showing through a little too much, given the grave circumstances. I've done as you advise, all the carbs and fats I can handle, but it doesn't seem to be doing much. It was never meant to. He wouldn't put on any more weight, but at least it would buy him time while I drove the 1,000-odd miles to get there. All that matters is I'm here now. It was quite the drive, though. He led me through his house towards the back into a smoking room. Tall bookshelves lined the walls, packed with rare and unusual tomes from every period. Some of the spines were battered and bruised, but every one of his collections was complete and arranged dutifully. Dark leather chairs with silver-studded arms claimed the center of the room, and a tasseled lamp glowed in one corner with an orange aura. It was dark, as cozy as it was intimidating. It had a presence of noxiously opulent masculinity, the kind of place bankers and businessmen would conduct shady deals behind closed doors. Quite a place you've got here, I noted, empty of any real sentiment. Thank you. This room doesn't see much use, but, well, there it is. He motioned to the back of the room. Displayed in a lit alcove in the back was a painting I'd come all this way to see. And where did you say you got it? A friend of mine bought it in an auction shortly before he died. He began, hobbling his way slowly through the room. His wife decided to give away some of his things. And there was just something about the raw emotion it invokes. His head shook as he spoke. And then you started losing weight yourself, starving like the man in the painting. That's right. I thought I was sick or something, but nobody could find anything wrong with me. And that's exactly what happened to your friend, too. His expression darkened, like I'd uttered something I shouldn't have. He didn't say a word. I cast my gaze up to the painting, directly into those haunting eyes, whoever the man in the painting was. His hunger still raged to the present day. His pain still seared through that stare, his suffering without cease. You were the first person to touch it after he died. The curse is yours. I looked back to his gaunt face, his skin hanging from his cheekbones. By willingly taking the painting, knowing the consequences, I accept the curse along with it. Miss, I really hope you know what you're doing. There was a slight fear in his eyes, diluted with the relief that he might make it out of this alive. Don't worry, I've got worse in my vault already. With that, I carefully removed the painting from the wall. You're free to carry on as you would normally. Thank you, miss, you're an angel. I chuckled at his thanks. No, sir, far from it. With a lot less haste than I had left, I made my way back to my home in a disused church in the hills. It was out the way, should the worst happen, in a sparsely populated region nestled between farms and wilderness. Creaky floorboards signaled my arrival, and the setting sun cast colorful, glittering light through the tall, stained glass windows. Right there in the middle of the otherwise empty room was a large vault crafted from thick lead, rimmed with a band of silver around its middle. On the outside, I had painstakingly painted a magic circle of protection. Around it, aligned with the orientation of the church and the stars. Around that was a circle of salt. I wasn't taking any chances. Clutching the painting under my arm in a protective box, I took the key from around my neck and unlocked the vault. With a heave, I swung the door open and peered inside to find a suitable place for it. To the inside walls, I had stuck pages from every holy book, hung talismans, harness crystals, and I'd have to repeat incantations and spray holy water every so often to keep things in check. Each object housed within my vault had its own history, and its own curse to go along with it. There was a mirror that you could look away from, a book that induced madness, a cup that poisoned anyone that drank from it. All manner of objects from many different generations of human suffering. Truth be told, I was starting to run out of room. I'd gotten very good at what had become my job, and had gotten a bit of a name for myself within the community. Not that I was out for fame or fortune, but the occult had interested me since I was a little girl. I pulled a few other paintings forwards and slid their new partner behind, standing back upright in full sight of one of my favorite finds, Pierce the puppet. He looked no different than when I found him, still with that frustrated anger fused to his porcelain face, contrasting the jovial clown doll he once was. Crude tufts of black string for hair protruded from a beaten yellow top hat, and his body was stuffed with straw upon which hung a musty, almost fungal smell. The spirit kept within him was laced with such vile anger that even here my vault remained not entirely neutralized. You know, I still feel kind of bad for you. I mentioned to him with a slight shrug, checking the large bucket I placed beneath him. Being stuck in here can't be great. He'd been rendered immobile by the wards of my vault, but if I managed to piss him off, he had a habit of throwing up blood. At one point, I tried keeping him in the bucket to prevent him from doing it in the first place, but I just ended up having to clean him too. Outside of the vault, he was a danger, but in here, he had been reduced to a mere anecdote. I took pity on him. My offer still stands, you know. I muttered to him, opening up a small wooden chest containing my most treasured find. Every time I came into the vault, I would look at it with a longing fondness. I peered down at the statue inside. It was a pair of hands, crafted from sunstone, grasping each other tightly as though holding something inside. It wasn't so much cursed as it was simply magical, more benign than malicious. Curiously, none of the protections I had in place had any effect on it whatsoever. I closed the lid again and stepped outside of the vault, ready to close it up again. Let your spirit pass on and you're free. It's as easy as that. No more darkness. No more vault, I said to the puppet, as I repeated my offered gurgle, blood raising through its middle. Fine, fine darkness, vault. Got it. I shut the door and walked away, thinking about the pierce, the hands, and the odd connection between them. It was a few years back now on a crisp October evening. Crunchy leaves scattered the graveyard outside my home, and the nights had begun to draw in too early for my liking. I was cataloging the items in my vault when I received a heavy knock at my front door. On the other side was a woman in scrubs holding a wooden box with something heavy inside. Embroidered into the chest pocket were the words, Silent Arbor Palliative Care, in a gold thread. She had black hair and unusual piercings, winged eyeliner and green eyes that stared right through me. There was something else to her, though, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. It looked like she'd come right after working at the hospice, but that would have been quite the drive. I couldn't quite tell if it was fatigue or defeat about her face, but she didn't seem like she wanted to be here. Hello. I questioned the unexpected visitor. I'm sorry to bother you. I don't like to show up unexpected, but sometimes I don't have much of a choice. She replied. Her voice was quite deep, but had a smooth softness to it. Can I help you with something? I hope so. She held the box out my way. I took it with a slight caution, surprised at just how heavy it actually was. I hear you deal with particular types of objects, and I was hoping to take one out of circulation. I realized where she was going with this. Usually, I'd have to hunt them down myself, but to receive one so readily made my job all the easier. Would you like to come inside? I asked her, wanting to inquire about whatever it was she had brought me. The focus of her eyes changed as she looked through me into the church before scanning upwards to the plain cedar cross that hung above the door. Actually, I'd better not. She muttered. I decided it best to not question her, instead opening the box to examine what I would be dealing with. A pair of hands, exquisitely crafted with a pink-orange semi-precious material, sunstone. I knew it as a protective material, used to clear negative energy and prevent psychic attacks. I didn't sense anything obviously malicious about the statuette, but there was an unmistakable power to it. There was something about it hiding in plain sight. I lifted the statue out of the box, rotating it from side to side while I examined it, but it quickly began to warm itself against my fingers, as though the hands were made of flesh rather than stone. Slowly, steadily, the fingers began to part like a flower going into bloom, revealing what it had kept safe all this time. It remained joined at the wrist, but something inside glimmered like northern lights for just a second with beautiful pale blues and reds. At the same time, my vision pulsed and blurred, and I found myself unable to breathe, as if I was suddenly in a vacuum. My eyes cast up the woman before me, as I struggled to catch my breath. The air felt as thick as molasses as I heaved my lungs, forcing air back into them and out again. I felt light, on the verge of collapsing, but steadily my breaths returned to me. Her eyes immediately widened with surprise, and her mouth hung slightly open. The astonishment quickly shifted into a smirk. She slowly let her head tilt backwards until she was facing upwards and released a deep sigh of pent-up frustration. Finally released. She laughed and laughed. I stood watching her, confused, still holding the hands of my own, still catching my breath, still lightheaded. I see. Her face convulsed with the remnants of her bubbling laughter. I waited so long, and all I had to do was let it go. She shook her head and held her hands up in defeat. In her voice, there was a tinge of something verging on madness. I have to go. There's somebody I need to see immediately, but hold on to that statue. You'll be paid well for it. With that, she skipped back into her 1980s white Ford Mustang, and with screeching tires, pulled off out my driveway and into the night. She never did pay me. Well, not with money. Anyway, time went on, as time often does. Memories of that strange woman faded from my mind, but every time I entered my vault, those hands caught my eye. I remained puzzled, perplexed with what they were supposed to be, what they were supposed to do. I could understand why she would give them to me if they had some terrible curse attached, or even something slightly unsettling. But they just sat there, doing nothing. She could have kept them on a shelf, and it wouldn't have made any difference to her life. Why get rid of it? I felt as though I was missing something. They opened up, something sparkled, and then they closed again. I lost my breath. It was a powerful magic, whatever it was, but its purpose eluded me. Things carried on relatively normally until I received a call about a puppet, a clown that had been given to a boy as a birthday present. It was his grandfather calling, recounting a sad tale of his grandson being murdered at a funhouse. He'd wound up lured by some older boys to break into an amusement park that had closed years before, only to be beaten and stabbed. They left him there, thinking nobody would find him. He brought the puppet with him that night in his school bag, but there was no sign of it in the police reports. He was only 8 when he died. Sad, but ordinary enough. The part that piqued my interest about the case was that strange murders kept happening in that funhouse. It managed to become quite the local legend, but was treated with skepticism as much as it was with fear. The boys who had killed him were in police custody, arrested, tried, and jailed. At first, people thought it was a copycat, since there were always the same amount of stab wounds. But no leads ever wound up linking to a suspect. The police boarded the place up and fixed the hole they'd entered through. It didn't stop kids from breaking in to test their bravery. It didn't stop kids from dying because of it. I knew what had to be done. It was already dusk before I made my way there. The sun hung heavily against the darkening sky, casting the amusement park into shadow against the beautiful gradient. The warped steel of a collapsing Ferris wheel tangled into the shape of trees in the distance, and proud peaks of tents and buildings scraped against the listless clouds. I stood outside the gates in an empty parking lot, where grass and weeds reclaimed the land, bringing life back through the cracked tarmac. Tall letters spanned in an arch over the ticket booths, their gates locked and chained. Lunar Park, it had been called, a wonderland of amusement for families that sprawled over miles with its own monorail to get around easier. It was cast along a hill and had been a favorite for years. It eventually grew dilapidated, and its bigger rides closed, and after passing through buyer after buyer, it wound up in the hands of a private equity firm, and its doors closed entirely. I started by checking my bag. I had my torch, holy water, salt, rope, wire cutters, all my usual supplies. I'd heard that kids had gotten into a gap in the fence near the back of the log flume, so I made my way around through a worn dirt path through the woodland that surrounded the park. Whoever had fixed up the fence hadn't done a fantastic job, simply screwing down a piece of plywood over the gap the kids had made. Getting inside was easy, but getting around would be harder. When this place was alive, there would be music blaring out from speakers atop their poles, lights to guide the way along the winding paths, and crowds to follow from one place to the next. Now, though, all that remained was a gaunt quiet and hallowed darkness. I came upon a crossroads marked with what was once a food stall that served overpriced slices of pizza and drinks that would have been mostly ice. There was a map on a signboard with a big red, "You are here," that amidst a maze of pathways between points of interest, mold had begun to grow beneath the plastic, covering up half of the map, while moisture blurred the dye together into an unintelligible mess. I squinted through the darkness, positioning my light to avoid the glare as I tried to make sense of it all. There was a sudden bang from within a food stall as something dropped to the floor, then a rattle from further around inside. My fear rose to a flicker of movement from the corner of my eye, skipping through the gloom beyond the counter. My guard raised, and I sunk a pocket into my bag. Curling my fingers around the wooden cross I'd stashed in there, I approached quietly and quickly swung my flashlight to where I'd heard the scampering. A small masked face hissed at me, its eyes glowing green in the light of my torch. Tiny needle-like teeth bared at me menacingly. But the creature bounded around the room and left from the back door where it had entered. It was just a raccoon. I heaved a deep breath and rolled my eyes, turning my attention back to the map until I found the funhouse. I walked along the eerie, silent corpse of the fairground, fallen autumn leaves scattering around my feet along a gentle breeze. Signs hung broken, weeds and grasses grew wild, and paint chipped away from every surface, leaving bare, rusty metal. The whole place was dead, decaying, and bit by bit returning to nature. At last, I came upon it. A mighty space built into 3 levels that had clearly once been a colorful, joyous place. Outside the entrance was a fiberglass genie reaching down his arms over double doors, peering inside as if to watch people enter. His expression was one of joy and excitement, but half of his head had been shattered in. Across the genie's arm, somebody had spray-painted the words, "Pay to enter, pray to leave." Given what had happened here, it seemed quite appropriate. A cold wind picked up behind me, and the tiny hairs across my body began to rise. The plywood boards the police had used to seal the entrance had already been smashed wide open. I took a deep breath, summoned my courage, and headed inside. I was led up a set of stairs that creaked and groaned beneath my feet, and suddenly met with a loud clack as one of the steps moved away from me, dropping under my foot to one side. It was on a hinge in the middle. So no matter what side I chose, I'd be met with surprise. After the next step, I expected it to come, carefully moving the stair to its lower position before I applied my weight. I was caught off guard again by another step moving completely down instead of just left to right. Even though I was on my own, I felt I was being made a fool of. Finally, with some difficulty, I made my way to the top to be met with a weathered cartoon figure with its face painted over with a skull. A warm welcome. Clearly, the stairway led to a circular room with yellow-gray glow and the dark paint spattered across the ceiling, made to look like stars. The phosphorus inside had long since gone untouched by the UV lights around the room, leaving the whole place dark. The floor was meant to spin around, but unpowered posed no threat. Before I crossed over, I found my mind wandering to the kid that died here. This was where he was found sprawled out across the disc, left to bleed out while looking up at a synthetic sky. I stared at the center of the disc as I crossed, picturing the poor boy screaming out, left alone and cold as the teens abandoned him here, slowly decaying, rotting, returning to nature just as the park was around him. My lips curled into a frown at the thought. Behind me, a fire alarm sounded and electrical pops crackled through the funhouse. Garbled fairground music began to play through weather-battered speakers, and in the distance lights cut through the darkness. More and more. The place began to illuminate, encroaching through the shadows until it reached the room I was in, and the ominous violet hue of the UV lights lit up. I was met with a spattered galaxy of glowing milky blue speckles across the walls, across the disc, and I quickly realized with horror that it wasn't the stars. It was his blood, sprayed with luminol and left unclean, the final testament of what had happened here. I was shaken by the immediacy of it all and started fumbling around in my bag. Salt? No. It wasn't a demon, copper, silver. No. My fingers fumbled across the spray bottle filled with holy water, trembling across the trigger as I tried to pull it out. My feet were taken from under me as the disc began spinning rapidly, and I bashed my face directly onto the cold metal. I scrambled to my feet, only to be cast down again as the floor changed directions. A twisted laugher blasted across the speakers in time with the music changing key. I wasn't sure if it was my mark or just part of the experience, but I wasn't going to hang around to find out. I got to my knees and waited for the wheel to spin towards the exit, rolling my way out and catching my breath. Ugh, fuck this. I scoffed, pressing onwards into a room with moving flooring. Sliding backwards and forwards, then into a hallway with floor panels that would drop or raise when stepped on, while jets of air burst out of floor and walls as they activated. The loud whoosh jolted me at first, but I quickly came to expect it. After pushing through soft bollards, I had to climb up to another level over stairs that constantly moved down like an escalator moving backwards. This led to a cylindrical tunnel, painted with swirls and patterns, with different sections of it moving in alternating directions and at different speeds. To say it was supposed to be a fun house, there was nothing fun about it. I still hadn't seen the puppet I was here to find. All around me, strobe lights flashed and pulsed in various tones, showing different paintings across the wall as different colors illuminated it. It was clever design, but I wasn't here for that. After I'd made my way through the tunnel, I had to contend with a hallway of spinning fabric like a car wash, all the while on guard for an ambush. As I made it through to the other side, the top of the slide was waiting for me. A noose hung from its top, hovering over the hole that sparkled with the now active twinkling lights. Somebody had spray painted the words 6 feet under, with an arrow leading down into the tunnel. I didn't have much choice. I pushed the noose to the side and put my legs in. I didn't dare to slide right down. I'd heard the stories of blades being fixed into place to shred people as they descended, or spikes at the other end to catch people unawares. Given the welcoming message somebody had tagged at the top, I didn't want to take my chances. I scooted my way down slowly, flashing lights leading the way down and around and around and around. It was free of any dangers, thankfully, and the bottom ended in a deep ball pit. I waded my way through, still on guard, and headed onwards into the Hall of Mirrors. Strobe lights continued to pulse overhead, flashing light and darkness across the scene before me. Some of the mirrors had been broken, and some had sprayed arrows across the glass to conveniently lead the way through. The music throbbed louder, and pressure plates activated more of the air jets that once again took me by surprise. I managed to hit a dead end, and turning around I realized I'd lost my way. Again, I hit a wall, turned to the right, and there I saw it. Sitting right there on the floor, that big grin across its painted face. It must have been around a foot tall, holding a knife in its hand about as big as a puppet was. My fingers clasped closer around the bottle of holy water as I began my approach, slowly, calculating directions. I lost sight of it as its reflection passed a frame around one of the mirrors. I backed up to get a view on it again, but it had vanished. I swung about, looking behind me to find nothing but my own reflection staring back at me 10 times over. I felt cold. I swallowed deeply, attuning my hearing to listen to it scamper about, unsure if it even could. All I could do was move deeper. I took a left, holding out my hand to feel for what was real and what was an illusion. All around me was glass again. I had to move back. I had to find it. In the previous hallway, I saw it again. This time I would be more careful. With cautious footsteps, I stalked closer, keeping my eyes trained on the way the mirrors around it moved its reflection about. The lights flickered off again for a moment as they strobed once more, but now it was gone again. Fuck. I huffed under my breath, moving faster now as my heart beat with heavy thuds. Feeling around on the glass, I turned another corner and saw an arrow sprayed in orange paint that I decided to follow. I ran faster, turning corner after corner as the lights flashed and strobed. Another arrow, another turn. I followed them, sprinting past other pathways, until I hit another dead end with a yellow smiley face painted on a broken mirror at the end. I was infuriated, scared shitless in this claustrophobic prison of glass. I turned again, and there it was, reflected in all the mirrors. I could see every angle of it, floating in place 2 feet off the floor, smiling at me. The lights flashed like a thunderstorm, and I raised my bottle. There was a strange rippling in the mirrors as the reflections began to distort and warp like the surface of water on a pond. A distraction, and before I knew it, the doll blasted to the air from every direction. I didn't know where to point, but I began spraying wildly as fast as my finger could squeeze. The music blared louder than before, and I grew immediately horrified at the sensation of a burning, sharp pain in my shoulder as the knife entered me. Again in my shoulder. I thrashed my hands to try to grab it, but grasped wildly at the air and at myself. Again it struck. It was a violent, thrashing panic as I fought for my life, gasping for air as I fell to ground, the bottle rolling away from me, out of reach. It hovered above me for a moment, still smirking, nothing more than a blackened silhouette as the lights above strove and flickered. I raised my arms defensively and muttered futile incantations as quickly as I could, expecting nothing but death. I saw its blackened outline raise the knife again, not to strike, but in question. I glanced to it myself, tracking its motion, and saw what the doll saw in the flashing lights. There was no blood. Confused, I quickly patted my wounds to find them dry. A sound of distant pattering out of pace with the music grew louder, quicker, and the confused doll turned the air to face the other direction. I thought it could be my chance, but before I could raise myself, another shadow blocked out the lights. Their hand clasped around the doll. With a tinkling clatter, the knife dropped to the ground and the doll began to thrash wildly, kicking and throwing punches with its short arms. A longer arm came to reach its face with a swift backhand, and the doll fell limp. I shuffled backwards against the glass with a smiley face, running my fingers against sharp fragments on the floor. The lights glinted again, illuminating a woman's face with unusual piercings, and I realized I'd seen her deep green eyes before. Still holding the doll, outright her eyes slid down to me, her face stoic with a stern indifference. I said nothing, my jaw agape as I stared up at her. I think I owe you an explanation. We left that place together, and through the inky night drove back to my church. The whole time I fingered at my wounds, still feeling the burning pain inside me, but seemingly unharmed. Questions bubbled to the forefront of my mind as I dissociated from the road ahead of me, and I arrived to find her white Mustang in the driveway while she sat atop the steps with a lifeless puppet in one hand, a lit cigarette in the other. The whole time I walked up, I couldn't take my eyes off her. Would you like to come inside? I asked. She shook her head. I'd better not. She took a long drag from her smoke, and with a heaving sigh, she closed her eyes and lowered her head. I saw her body judder for a moment, nothing more than a shiver, and her head raised once more, her hair parting to reveal her face again. This time, though, the green in her eyes was replaced with a similar glowing milky blue as a luminol. The origin of the trickster hands baffles death, as knowledgeable as she is. Centuries ago, a man defied death by hiding a soul between the hands. For the first time, death was unable to take someone's soul. For the first time, death was cheated, powerless. Death has tried to separate the hands ever since, without success. It seemed the trick to the hands was to simply give up. Death has a lot of time on her hands. She doesn't tend to give up easily. We saw their soul release. Death paid a visit to him, and for the first time, really enjoyed taking someone's soul to the afterlife. However, the hands are now holding another soul. Your soul. Don't think death is angry with you. You were caught unknowingly in this. For that, death apologizes. Until the day the hands decide to open again, know you are immortal. I looked away, taking it all in. That answers some of my questions. The light faded from her eyes again as they darkened into that forest green. I cocked my head to one side, before I had a chance to open my mouth to speak. The puppet began to twitch and gurgle, a sound that would become all too familiar, as it spewed blood that spattered across the steps of this hallowed ground. Story 10. I recommend that you don't go shopping for cards at Cards and Monsters. I have been playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Since I was a kid. I watched almost every anime, played few games, and I collect physical cards and play in real life. Yu-Gi-Oh! Became my hobby that I probably would never grow out of, since it's so dear to my heart. With each generation and each new edition, I was happy to experiment and learn new summoning methods, new decks and archetypes and combos that became possible with new cards. It brought me many good memories, but recently I had a strange experience that I have to share. Take this as a warning. I had a friend named Samantha, who was also a very big fan of Yu-Gi-Oh! We met at a local tournament. I was excited to play with my all-time favorite deck, Gladiator Beasts, group of anthropomorphic animals who can fuse together without needing a spell into big, powerful animal warriors. I noticed that one of the only girls here was a blonde girl in green turtleneck sweater and long brown skirt. I decided to have a duel with her, and she happily accepted my offer. I expected her to play a girly or cutesy archetype, like Melodious Divas or Medalsas, but she played dinosaurs and absolutely destroyed my gladiators. We eventually became friends after our duel, complimenting each other's skills and card choices. Ever since that day, we were very close. Samantha was my source of news for new cards, leaks, and new content for the franchise, because somehow she managed to find a lot more info about upcoming cards than I do. And from her, I found out about the new at the time box set by the name of Supreme Darkness, which supposedly contained new wave of support for evil heroes, Speedroids, Arcana Force, and Gladiators. Imagine my face when I heard that my favorite archetype will finally get support. Samantha was more excited about Speedroids, an archetype of machine monsters themed around different toys from the anime. Samantha told me when the set would come out, and we marked our calendars so as soon as the day comes, we can get packs with our money. My job allowed me to afford an entire box of these cards because my boss and I have good relationships, and because I am very helpful, he raised my payment recently. So I plan to get all the cards from the set to make my old deck stronger and come back with a new and improved deck. Problem was, we were impatient or excitement and curiosity led us to the situation. Like I said before, Sammy somehow managed to find all the interesting info about the game. But one day, she came to my house with a big grin on her face. When I asked why she was smiling, she told me that she found a weird store that had the set on the shelf days earlier. She didn't buy it, because at the time she had barely any money left after she spent it on new furniture in her house. She just kind of came and left. It's no secret that sometimes some people in countries get new stuff early, and some stores can probably get new item in their stores before the date they are supposed to be put on shelves. I was a bit curious, but at the same time, it sounded like some sort of joke. Samantha actually thought that maybe it's our chance to get the cards earlier. I shrugged, and out of curiosity, I decided that we could at least check and see if what she saw was not a bootleg or fake with horribly translated cards inside. We arrived at the store on my car. The store's neon sign read Cards and Monsters. Very creative. Next to word cards was a card soldier, kind of like ones you see in Disney's Alice in Wonderland movie. And next to word monsters, there was a dragon. The store itself looked kind of old. I thought it was maybe an old store that was repurposed. I couldn't see the inside of the store because the windows were really dark, so much so that I couldn't figure out if the lights are off or the glass is just dark. Sammy decided to enter the store, so she grabbed the handle and pushed it. I expected the store to be closed, but the sound of wind chimes proved me wrong. When I entered, I thought that maybe we made a mistake, because it didn't look like your average card store. It looked like a bookstore. If you've ever been to a bookstore, you probably know the layout. Shelves everywhere, a table with few books for sale or books of the week, different sections for each genre. Only instead of books, they had cards. Boxes of cards of different origins. Magic, Pokemon, Digimon TCG, and of course, Yu-Gi-Oh! I looked at the assortment of different cards, and soon realized that something was missing. There was no owner nor a single worker. I thought that maybe we came at the wrong time and owner went to get lunch. We're getting close the store, but we came at 11 a.m. It was too early for lunch. Sammy eventually found the section with Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards, and she was right. The pack was there weeks before its release, sitting on the shelf with a price tag. I couldn't believe my eyes. And it was not fake. It had the date, the licensing, and everything. I couldn't really judge it too early, though. Sammy suggested I grab an entire box, but I told her that I don't want to spend too much money on an entire box of what could be bootleg cards. So I just grabbed a few packs for me and her, but my eyes noticed something else. Another box that I haven't seen. I looked at Sammy for a moment with a finger pointing at it. Sam was also very confused, which surprised me, because she always seemed to know about everything that would get released in the future. It was a box with name Doom of Dimensions. She hadn't heard of it. Neither did I. I decided to grab 5 packs from the box and see what they contained. We went to pay for the packs, but no one was around. Samantha jokingly told me that we could steal them, but I didn't want to seem like a scalper or a thief. I decided to write a note to whoever owned the place and leave the money as payment. As we were leaving, I looked back and saw that boxes got refilled. I thought it was my imagination and just my eyes tricking me. When we came back to my place, we opened packs of Supreme Darkness first. As I opened the packs, I checked for signs of legitimacy, such as ID numbers, copyrights, and so on. Those were indeed real cards. As I opened more packs and searched for support for my deck, I heard Sam speak. Those are legit. What do you mean? Which ones are legit? Doom of Dimensions. Dude, we have cards in our hands that aren't even available yet. It probably doesn't even exist yet. How is that even possible? No rumors, no signs of it being made. Not even a word about this set. I have no idea. But if they have these cards in store, do you think that they will have other packs that we don't know about? This store has to have some sort of ties to Konami. No, it would have been too risky to sell boxes that aren't even out yet or even revealed. There was no possible explanation that made sense. Only paranormal explanations came into my mind. We stumbled upon a strange drawer that somehow manages to have cards from a far future in it. At the time of writing this, the box we found turned out to actually be real, coming out in September, 10 months after we found it. We were intrigued and excited. Our curiosity made us want to see what Konami has in store for next months and years. So we plan to go to the store again, some other time. After a few weeks, we returned. Samantha was excited, and she burst through the door as soon as I parked my car near the entrance, like a kid go to the store to get a new toy. As I looked around, the store was still empty. Either we came at the wrong time again, or the store doesn't even have an owner. Maybe it was one of those stores with no cashiers. I looked at different cards and sets for different trading card games that laid on the table with other various boxes and sets. Surprisingly, I found a few sets that I haven't seen before. A Pokemon card set with what seemed to be Zygarde attached to a blimp or a nuke on the cover. That was strange. But this was how I found out about Zygarde getting a Mega Evolution in newest game. Samantha called me and I came to see what she found. That's when I noticed that she shelf was almost endless. The store wasn't that large, but couldn't see the end. Sam snapped me out of my trance and pointed at a box set with what seemed to be Borlo Dragon on the cover, a monster from one of the seasons of anime who was famous for having plenty of forms that seemed play in competitive scene and being generally a cool design. A red mechanical gun dragon. I looked at other packs, and one caught my eye. What I really did not expect was to see Viacroid support on the box. Viacroids were cards with cartoony machines on them. They weren't really that good in the game because they couldn't work too well with each other, but I liked them nonetheless. But I grabbed a few packs, and Sam grabbed a few from one of the furthest ones. I put money on the counter and looked back at the shelf. The boxes got refilled. I was not tripping. We grabbed plenty of packs, but it looked like it hasn't been touched. Even though I was excited for our next findings, I couldn't shake off the feelings that what we were doing wasn't right. We literally look into the future and get cards that don't even exist yet. Is this really okay? Each time we went to that store, we would buy new packs. The store would be empty as usual. We'd leave, the shelves get restocked, and I would check what I got at home. But one thing I noticed was that it felt like the shelf started to get shorter, little by little. I thought I was seeing things again. I felt like something was off about that place. It felt too good to be true. Sammy and I decided to go to the store once again, because Sammy was too eager to get new cards for her brand new deck. I just decided to not get any cards at all, and instead explore the store. We came, Sammy went to the shelf, and I proceeded to explore the store, looking around the shelves for anything interesting. As I explored, I found a door for employees' only room, hidden out of sight behind shelves. Maybe it led to storage area, I thought. I grabbed the handle and twisted it out of curiosity, and to my surprise, it opened. It was not even locked. The room was dusty and dark. I had a hard time holding my sneezes inside. It led to a basement area. I used my phone's flashlight to go down and found a small room with tables, few chairs, shelves, a TV, and even a bunch of papers. I looked around in the dark. The light switch didn't work, so I couldn't turn the lights on. I explored until I tripped on something. I pointed the flashlight at whatever that was, only to find a dead body of a person. I jumped at the sight of it. Breath quickened, and I was ready to go upstairs. But I calmed myself down and tried to inspect the body first to see cause of death and who the unlucky fellow was. I took a look at him, broken neck, broken mug on the floor, lying on his back, due to his close distance to the stairs. I assumed that he was on his way upstairs, but tripped and tumbled down, breaking his bones in process. His clothes looked like a uniform, and he had a badge, so he must have been a worker. Eric Mitch, that was his name. I took a look at the table with the documents on it, and noticed what seemed to be a log or a documentation of sorts, written by the worker. It was written with a typewriter of all things. Pretty old-looking thing. I decided to sit down and look through it quickly. This guy was documenting strange occurrences in this store since it was reopened. First, nothing unusual happened, until at one point, a customer found a box set that they didn't have at the store. He didn't know what to think of it, so he tried to tell the customer that they don't sell these, but that wouldn't make sense, since it should be on the shelf. Where else would they find it? He decided to just give the box set to the customer for a price and let them go. Eventually, he noticed that shelves seemed to have more products on them that he and his co-workers weren't familiar with or have on the list. That didn't stop them from taking advantage of this strange anomaly, so they started selling these for a price of normal boxes. Every time they would sell them, the shelves would be restocked on their own, which was odd. The last pages describe how workers would disappear or just leave for whatever reason, leaving Eric as the only worker. He also mentioned that one customer asked why the box they wanted was missing, but when he checked it was still on the shelf. But they insisted that it's not there, like it was invisible. He started to also notice that the length of their shelves would extend and shorten with time, just what I experienced. Last page described a bunch of incidents involving customers he was familiar with dying. One got hit by a car, the other had an accident at work. The writing seemed to get cut off. I assumed that this must be a point where he wanted to go upstairs and fell. I felt uneasy. What could this mean? My brain tried to come up with an explanation, which eventually led to me forming a terrifying theory of what was going on. This store is not normal. It gives people opportunity to get cards and products from the future out of nowhere. Mere presence in the store and interaction with said products leads to them slowly disappearing off the shelves. And that's when it hit me. What if every product on the shelf is a certain point in time? And if it disappears, maybe we are losing years off our life? It didn't make sense and it sounded crazy, but what am I even supposed to believe at this point? All these thoughts ran through my head, and I started to panic more and more. I had to leave with Sammy before things go bad. I went upstairs and saw Sammy with a disappointed look. Dude, you won't believe it. Doom of Dimensions is gone. I was going to buy it today, but it's not here. Have they run out packs? Also, where have you been? That's when I took a look at the shelf. It was shorter than last time I saw it. Some box sets were gone off the shelf completely. Boxes that I saw on shelf many weeks and days ago were gone. The shelf got shorter. But problem was, Doom of Dimensions was still on the shelf. My heart jumped. Document, it mentioned same thing. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed Sammy's hand and told her that we are leaving. She didn't want to go, but I told her that I will explain to her what happened later. We ran out of the store and got into the car. I completely forgot about the body that was at the store, but I left the door open so someone could find the guy. I just couldn't think rationally at that point in time. I explained to her everything. The man, the note, the anomalies in the store, and the fact that we might have risked our lives for the sake of getting cards early. Sammy clearly didn't know what to say, and neither did I. I felt worried, nervous for what had happened. Where do we go from here? Sammy's positive demeanor changed, and she became very quiet. We had a hard time talking about the game or any news, because we would get reminded that we already knew what next cards were going to be. We felt no excitement, just dread from realization that we may not live too long to witness sets of packs we bought at that store, especially Sammy, who apparently went to the store without me several times, and I didn't even know. It's been months since the last venture to the store. The store is still standing and people still visit it, not knowing what awaits them inside. I burnt the cards that I got from the store, along with the gladiator cards I got. As much as I liked them, I don't know why, but I felt safer afterwards. Can't explain why. I still play Yu-Gi-Oh, but I buy cards from stores that I know and support my local businesses. For now, I've been doing all right. Can't say the same about Sammy. Recently, she went to her grandma's place in the other city. But during her trip on a taxi, a speeding vehicle crashed into it and killed both her and the driver. She snapped her neck from a knockback. It happened several days before the release of Doom of Dimensions in the US. I hope she is in a better place. And if my time comes, we could see each other again.